Detective Carla Meza glanced at the crumpled note she held in her hand, then at the busy streets outside the Chicago Police Department's 1st District station. The note had been slipped under her office door the night before, presumably during the late hours when she was away at a crime scene. It read, "Something waits in the old meatpacking building on Fulton Market. Please help. It's not human." She frowned at the words, trying to figure out whether it was a prank or a genuine plea. As a detective, she specialized in violent crimes, mostly homicides and missing person cases. The bizarre tone of the note, however, suggested something deeper, almost conspiratorial. She remembered the rumors, unsolved disappearances in the West Loop, weird sightings reported by night shift workers. It would hardly be the first time she'd chased after cryptic leads, but this one left a pang of unease. Outside, the bustle of downtown Chicago carried on as if nothing was amiss. Tourists flocked to Millennium Park, locals hurried to offices in the Loop, and traffic snarled along the streets. Carla's partner, Detective Ryan Brophy, joined her at the station's side entrance, sipping a large coffee from a styrofoam cup. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and had an enduring look of skepticism on his face, something Carla knew all too well. He saw the note in her hand. "Another weird tip?" She nodded, passing it to him. "Someone slid it under my door last night." Brophy raised an eyebrow after a quick read. "Fulton Market District, old meatpacking plant, something that's not human. That's a new twist." Carla sighed, stepping away from the flow of uniformed officers entering the station. "Remember those missing persons? Half a dozen in the last 6 months, no strong leads. Some were last seen leaving nightclubs near Fulton Market." "Yeah, I remember," Brophy said, scratching his chin. "But we combed the area and none of the usual suspects panned out. This might be connected." Carla nodded. "It's a long shot, but we need to check it out. Even if it's just a lead about a vagrant or squatter, it's something." They made their way to the station's parking lot, climbing into an unmarked Ford sedan. The sound of sirens in the distance merged with the hum of city life. Carla plugged the address of an abandoned meatpacking facility into the car's navigation system. Though Chicago's West Loop had seen plenty of revitalization and upscale restaurants, older buildings still lingered on the fringes of those newly developed areas. Some were rumored to house squatters and occasionally worse. As she started the engine, the detective glanced again at the note's cryptic final words, "It's not human." Part of her wanted to dismiss it, while another part of her, the part that believed every rumor contained a kernel of truth, felt a prickle of dread. She forced herself to focus on the facts. Even if it was just another unsheltered individual scaring people, it deserved a look. People had vanished and every possibility had to be explored. The drive to Fulton Market was short. Within minutes they arrived at a block lined by old warehouses. As they parked near a structure with boarded-up windows, Carla felt a chill. Large letters reading Johnston and Sons Meats were still faintly visible on the weathered brick facade. "That place has been closed for years," Brophy remarked, stepping out onto the cracked pavement. "We've looked into it before when searching for runaways, but always came up empty." Carla nodded, scanning the area. The street was a mix of trendy restaurants on one end and decaying industrial buildings on the other. Gentrification had crept through this part of the city, but pockets of neglect persisted, especially at night. A few pedestrians wandered by, mostly young professionals headed to lunch spots. Nobody seemed to pay the two detectives any attention. She and Brophy circled to a side entrance. A rusted metal door, its handle secured with a chain and padlock, barred entry. Carla pulled out a small flashlight, shining it along the door's seams. She noticed scrapes where the metal met the frame, like someone had pried it open recently, then tried to seal it again. Brophy checked the lock. "New chain but a cheap padlock. We can get through." Carla nodded. "I'll call for uniform backup just in case. Let's do a quick sweep." While waiting for backup, they tested the perimeter. All the ground floor windows were boarded up with old plywood. Graffiti covered much of the building's exterior, some of it fresh, some of it older. On the back side of the facility they found a sagging loading dock. A stench of rotting trash and stagnant water hung in the air. Carla wondered if there were any squatters. Typically, they would either be visible or leave signs of habitation. Right now, everything felt eerily still. When two uniformed officers arrived, they helped remove the chain and pushed the metal door open. It screeched in protest, sending a hollow echo through the darkness inside. They entered with flashlights raised, shining beams across the dusty interior. Old metal rails, once used to hang and move cuts of meat, crisscrossed the ceiling. The air was stale, tinged with the lingering odor of old meat and disinfectant. "Chicago PD," Brophy called out, voice echoing. "Anyone here?" The only response was the drip of water somewhere deep in the building. They advanced carefully, stepping over debris. Carla's flashlight played across a broken desk, file cabinets, rusted hooks. The place resembled a time capsule from when it shut down. Signs for the USDA, scattered shipping invoices from the late 1970s, and scrawled graffiti from more recent visitors. One of the uniformed officers, Perez, motioned them over. He'd spotted footprints in the dust near a corridor leading to the cold storage rooms. The prints looked fresh, maybe a day or two old. They followed them into a dark corridor lined with thick doors. Carla tried one door, only to find it welded shut. Another door squeaked open, revealing an empty refrigerated chamber. The footprints continued onward, weaving deeper into the facility. "This place gives me the creeps," said Officer Perez. "I heard about some of the missing persons near here. Could be a hideout, I guess." Carla's heart thumped. They'd scoured similar places in the past, but something about the silent gloom set her nerves on edge. She couldn't help thinking back to that note about something not human. She told herself it was nonsense, yet the uncanny quiet fed a nagging sense of dread. They reached a large central processing area. Steel tables stood in rows, some toppled. A few heavy plastic curtains, the kind used to separate different cutting zones, still hung from overhead tracks. Most were torn, stained with who knew what from decades ago. As they swept their flashlights around, Carla noticed a door leading to an office on an upper level. A battered metal staircase rose to the second floor. No footprints went that way, but something about it caught her eye. She nudged Brophy. "I'm going to check that office." He nodded, continuing to follow the footprints along with the uniformed officers. Carla ascended the stairs alone, footsteps reverberating in the hollow space. At the top, she found a locked door with a glass window set into it. The glass was smeared with grime, but she could see inside, a small desk and some shelves. She carefully jimmied the lock until it clicked, then pushed the door open. The office had that old musty odor of paper left to rot. Rows of dusty ledgers lined a shelf, presumably records from the facility's business days. Carla's flashlight revealed a corkboard pinned with shipping schedules, phone numbers, and a single black and white photograph of workers from decades ago. She approached the desk, shining the light over a clutter of old receipts. Nothing of obvious relevance, just the cast-off remnants of a business that closed before she was born. Then something else drew her attention. A battered cardboard box beneath the desk, sealed with duct tape that looked far more recent than anything else in the room. She crouched, carefully peeling away the tape. Inside was a stack of photographs, modern color prints, not old black and whites. Her blood ran cold as she realized they depicted people, mostly young men and women, at various locations around Chicago. Outside clubs, at CTA train stations, near the Chicago Riverwalk. Some were in restaurants, others on the sidewalk. All the photos looked candid, as if taken without the subject's knowledge. Carla's stomach twisted. Some of these people looked familiar. She remembered a few from missing person bulletins posted around the precinct. One shot showed a young man heading into a bar in River North. Another captured a woman waiting for a bus near Navy Pier. A third depicted a pair of college students outside the University of Illinois at Chicago campus. She recognized them all from missing persons reports. Feeling a surge of adrenaline, she rummaged deeper into the box. Beneath the photographs, she found typed notes with dates and times, marking each subject's last known sighting. She snapped photos of everything with her phone. The revelation made the situation very real. Whoever had been using this abandoned building was stalking people. She had to alert Brophy. That was when she heard the first muffled scream from somewhere below. Carla bolted from the office, hurrying down the rickety metal staircase. The scream faded, replaced by frantic shouts and the sound of footsteps scurrying. "Over here," she heard Brophy yell, his voice echoing through the facility. She sprinted into the central processing area, shining her flashlight in the direction of the noise. Brophy and Officer Perez were by a door set into the far wall, struggling to open it. The second uniformed officer, a woman named Riley, scanned the darkness, weapon drawn. "What happened?" Carla asked, breathless. "We heard something," Brophy said, yanking on the handle. "Like a cry for help behind this door, but it's barricaded." Officer Perez slammed his shoulder into it, but it barely budged. A low scraping sound came from inside. "There's someone in there," he insisted. Carla's heart hammered. She glanced around for another way in, but this door seemed to be the only entrance. If someone was behind it, maybe one of the missing. She had to help. Brophy tried kicking the door, wincing as it barely gave an inch. He gave Carla a sharp look. We might need the pry bar from the trunk. She nodded, sprinting back the way she came, but she halted mid-step. A new sound emerged, a slow, deliberate scraping from behind another set of plastic curtains off to the left. She pointed her flashlight that way, drawing her weapon in the process. You hear that? Officer Riley turned, stepping cautiously toward the sound. The plastic curtain rustled. Carla's flashlight revealed a faint shape behind it, tall, strangely contorted. Her pulse quickened as the shape moved, parting the curtain slightly. A flash of something pale and elongated was all she saw before it vanished deeper into the shadows. What the? Riley whispered, stepping closer. Carla felt a spike of alarm. Careful. They inched toward the curtain, hearts pounding. The rank odor of old meat intensified as they parted the plastic. Beyond was a smaller processing chamber about 20 feet square with a few scattered crates. Water dripped from a broken pipe overhead. The beam of Carla's flashlight swept across the floor. Movement flickered in the corner. She jerked the light upward in time to see something slink away into a side corridor. It was gone too quickly to discern. But there was a definite impression of a humanoid shape, albeit unnaturally thin and pallid. Carla's mind raced. Could it be a vagrant suffering from malnutrition, or someone wearing a mask? Her gut said something else was at play, something that defied easy explanation. She shook off that thought. She was a detective, not a believer in urban legends. She and Riley exchanged glances. We have to clear that corridor, Carla said quietly. But we can't abandon the door where Brophy and Perez are trying to get in. Riley nodded, swallowing hard. I'll go back them up. You want to follow that? Carla steeled herself. Yeah, I need to check if it's a suspect. Or a victim. Riley left and Carla advanced alone, hugging the wall. The corridor was narrow and pitch black, forcing her to rely on the flashlight. She radioed Brophy to update him. Possible suspect in the back corridors. I'm pursuing. Status on the barricaded door. We're forcing it open, came Brophy's tense reply. We'll join you as soon as we can. Be careful. Carla crept forward, stepping over puddles of stagnant water and broken tiles. Every so often she paused, listening to the drip-drip of water and the faint hum of distant traffic through the building's crumbling walls. Then she heard it, a soft, wet breathing sound like air being sucked through parted lips. She swung the flashlight around a corner and froze. A pale face peeked around from behind a set of toppled crates, the features unnervingly gaunt. The eyes, if you could call them eyes, reflected the flashlight's beam like an animal's, shining a dull, grayish hue. No hair. The skin was sallow and tight against the skull. Carla's breath caught in her throat. She aimed her gun. Stop. Police. The figure withdrew with startling speed, slipping behind the crates. Carla's heart hammered as she rushed forward, carefully rounding the corner. The space behind the crates was empty. A faint scuttling noise echoed overhead. She jerked her flashlight upward and saw a glimpse of a pale foot vanishing into the ceiling, through a broken vent cover. Dust rained down as the metal vent rattled. Carla nearly pulled the trigger out of sheer reflex, but it was gone in an instant. Whatever it was, it had climbed into the ventilation system. She stood there, adrenaline coursing, mind in turmoil. Could a normal human move like that? Climb a narrow vent with such agility? Every rational part of her brain screamed that there must be a logical explanation. Perhaps a practiced contortionist or an extremely agile person. Yet something about its movements and appearance defied logic. She radioed Brophy again, voice unsteady. Ryan, we have some kind of suspect. Inhumanly fast. It just crawled into the vents. Brophy's voice crackled back. We got into the barricaded room. You're not going to believe this. There's a captive, severely malnourished, says he's been here for days. He claims something's been hunting him. He's in bad shape, possible broken leg. We called an ambulance. Carla inhaled shakily. If there really was someone or something preying on people in the building, it matched the captive's story. You have enough officers with you? I think it's in the ventilation system. Perez and Riley are with me. We've got the victim out. He's an adult male, mid-20s, name is Greg. We'll secure the area, wait for paramedics. You keep safe, Carla. Copy, she said, heart pounding. She realized she was alone in a labyrinth of corridors. The building's ventilation system likely snaked through the entire structure. If something was up there, it could emerge anywhere. She hurried back toward the main area, but paused when she heard an unearthly moan echo through the ducts above. Her skin prickled. The moan was faint, as though originating from deeper in the vents, and it rose to a keening wail before cutting off abruptly. Carla stared at the ceiling in horror. No mere human made that sound. She forced herself to remain calm. She was a detective with a job to do. People's lives might be at stake. She resumed her route to the main area, stepping carefully. Finally she reached the others. Brophy stood by a disheveled man slumped against the wall, while Perez and Riley kept watch. The man, presumably Greg, had a torn jacket and hollow cheeks. Dark circles clung under his eyes, and he shivered despite the stagnant heat. An ambulance siren wailed faintly in the distance. Carla crouched beside him, scanning for injuries. "Greg, I'm Detective Meza. We're going to get you out of here." "What happened?" His voice came out ragged, lips cracked. I was heading home from a bar, got jumped. Woke up in here. Oh God, something tried to feed on me. It chased me, cornered me. I managed to barricade that door. I've been stuck for days. Water dripping from pipes was all I had to drink. I thought I was dead." Carla exchanged a worried glance with Brophy. Greg's story matched the missing person pattern. Last seen near a bar, vanished without a trace. But the notion of something feeding on him? She asked gently, "Did you see who it was?" Greg's eyes, wild with trauma, flicked around the dimly lit chamber. "Not who. What? Pale, gaunt, not normal. It bit me." He lifted his pant leg, revealing a ragged wound on his calf. The bite marks looked almost human, but elongated, as though inflicted by someone with abnormally shaped jaws. Carla's stomach churned at the sight. Footsteps echoed in the corridor, paramedics arriving, escorted by more uniformed officers. They rushed to Greg's side. The building had become a flurry of law enforcement activity. Carla and Brophy quickly briefed the newcomers, though they omitted the strangest details, not wanting to incite panic or confusion. The official story: "We found a victim, possible kidnapping suspect on the loose, extremely dangerous." Greg was carried out on a stretcher, receiving immediate medical treatment. The tension in the air remained palpable. Officer Perez wiped sweat from his brow, glancing at Carla and Brophy. "What the hell are we dealing with? Some kind of drug-crazed individual?" Carla hesitated, uncertain how to respond. Brophy stepped in, adopting his usual pragmatic tone. "We can't rule out anything yet. Could be a severely deranged suspect, potentially malnourished themselves, which might explain the pale appearance. Could be on some new narcotic. We need to keep searching. Secure the building, see if there are more victims." Perez and Riley nodded, though Carla sensed their unease. She herself was rattled after seeing that pale figure vanish into the vents. Still, protocol demanded a thorough sweep. The two uniformed officers joined the newly arrived backup in methodically checking each room. Carla and Brophy led the main group, warning them to watch the vents and the overhead rails. The deeper they went, the more evidence they found of prior occupancy. Scraps of clothing, personal items, even a small area that looked like a nest of rags stuffed in a corner, possibly used by the suspect. Blood stains dotted the floor in places, some old and dry, others more recent. Carla's mind spun. How long had these horrors been unfolding here? They eventually reached a sub-basement where the smell of damp concrete and mildew was overpowering. Rusty pipes dripped overhead, forming shallow pools of stagnant water on the floor. Carla's flashlight revealed an old corridor leading to a sealed freezer room. According to a faded sign, it once stored beef carcasses. Now it was padlocked shut from the outside. Brophy jiggled the lock. Locked tight. Might be worth a look inside, though. Carla nodded, stepping aside as an officer with bolt cutters approached. The chain snapped and they wrenched open the thick metal door. A blast of foul air struck them, stale and bitter. The freezer room was large, lined with old hooks and metal shelves. Flashlights swept over a sight that made Carla's stomach drop. A makeshift shrine of sorts. Candles, long extinguished, surrounded a wooden crate draped in a tattered cloth. Strange symbols had been scratched into the floor, swirling patterns reminiscent of some arcane script. Officer Riley muttered under her breath, crossing herself. Carla's heart thundered. She wasn't sure if it was some occult nonsense or just the workings of a disturbed mind. Either way, the presence of a bizarre shrine in the same place where people had gone missing heightened the sense of horror. They moved closer, carefully avoiding stepping on the symbols. Resting on the crate was a glass jar filled with what looked like black sludge. The odor made Carla gag. Beside it lay a coil of old rope and a small pile of rotted cloth. Everything felt diseased, as though it had been steeped in decay for years. Brophy took pictures with his phone while the officers fanned out to search the corners. Then Carla spotted something more horrifying, a collection of bones stacked in a corner. They looked small, too small to be from livestock. A wave of revulsion hit her as she realized they were probably human. The others noticed too, and a collective hush fell. This was no mere kidnapping scenario. Something truly monstrous had been happening here. One of the uniformed officers, face pale with shock, called it in. "We've got human remains, multiple skeletonized. Requesting forensics. This is a homicide scene." Carla inhaled sharply, forcing herself to keep it together. "Everyone stand by. This area is a crime scene." Brophy, usually unflappable, wore an ashen expression. "This explains the missing persons, but not the thing we saw. Or the speed it moved. We need to seal this place off thoroughly." The sub-basement rumbled faintly as a train passed on elevated tracks somewhere outside. The building's old pipes rattled. Then a crash came from the corridor behind them, followed by shouts. Guns drawn, they rushed back out, discovering two officers knocked to the ground. They groaned, disoriented. Above them, an overhead vent gaped open, metal cover dangling by a single screw. The suspect, the figure, must have dropped down, attacked them, and retreated. Carla aimed her flashlight around, but there was no trace except for the metallic tang of blood in the air. Confusion turned to alarm. One officer had a nasty cut across his forehead. "It jumped on me," hissed. "Pale face, sharp teeth. I shot at it, but I think it got away." Carla felt adrenaline spike. Everyone was on high alert, scanning for movement in the gloom. "We'll coordinate a full sweep. It can't get far." But deep down, she sensed they were chasing something beyond normal. She recalled the scuttling up the wall, the unnatural wail, the horrifying speed. Even with half the Chicago Police Department in here, they might not corner it easily. Nevertheless, the hunt began. Additional backup arrived outside, and the perimeter was secured with squad cars, flashing lights bathing the old building in red and blue. Word spread through the station that they had discovered a macabre scene, fueling speculation among officers and the press. Already, reporters were gathering beyond the police tape, demanding answers. The official line was that they were investigating multiple homicides. Inside, Carla tried to focus on the tangible evidence. She retrieved the box of photographs from the upstairs office, handing it over to a forensics tech. "We have pictures of multiple missing persons plus the bones down below. This has been going on for some time." Brophy rubbed his temples. "If that thing is still inside, we might corner it. But these vents and corridors give it too many escape routes." At that moment, Carla's phone buzzed with an incoming call from Captain Graves, who rarely made direct calls to detectives in the field unless it was urgent. She stepped aside to answer. "Mesa," the captain's gravelly voice intoned, "I've got an urgent heads up. The mayor's office is concerned about public panic. The press is swirling. Keep the details minimal until we know what's happening. Are you safe?" "Yes, sir," Carla replied. "We found a suspect or something that's extremely dangerous. Multiple remains, probable link to the missing person cases." "Understood. Handle it. The commissioner wants results. And no wild rumors. These missing person cases have been overshadowing city business for too long. Clear?" "Yes, Captain." She ended the call, exhaling heavily. Politics were always at play in big cities like Chicago. The press would sensationalize a potential serial killer. The mention of anything inhuman would spark chaos. Meanwhile, Carla just wanted to protect people and stop this horror. They resumed the search. Teams methodically cleared the building's main levels, descending from the rooftop to each floor. The vents were systematically sealed as best they could. K9 units were called in, but the dogs behaved skittishly, whining and refusing to proceed past certain points. It was as if they sensed a predator lurking in the shadows. Carla exchanged uneasy glances with Brophy. Dogs usually pressed forward unless they smelled something terrifying or unnatural. Hours passed without any sign of the figure. Eventually, the building was deemed secure. No sign of movement, no fresh footprints. It was as if the suspect had vanished. The working theory was that it fled through an old drainage tunnel connected to the sub-basement. Investigators found a broken grate leading to the city's labyrinth of storm drains. That would complicate matters immensely. The suspect could be anywhere beneath the streets now. Night fell, and the entire block around Fulton Market was cordoned off. Under floodlights, crime scene techs began cataloging the remains, the photographs, and the bizarre shrine. Carla, exhausted, returned to the station to file preliminary reports. She found her desk piled with messages from local media outlets. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Everyone wanted to know what had happened in the old meatpacking plant. Days blurred into one another as the investigation intensified. The major newspapers, Chicago Tribune, Chicago Sun-Times, ran stories about a gruesome discovery tied to unsolved disappearances. Officially, the PD spoke of a potential serial killer with unusual habits. But the tabloids and rumor mills latched onto the more sensational aspects. Internet forums buzzed with talk of a Chicago ghoul, a monstrous entity rumored to dwell in old industrial sites and sewers. Detective Meza spent long hours poring over missing person case files. She and Brophy reviewed forensic evidence from the building. All told, they recovered remains from at least 15 individuals. Some had been missing for over a decade. The state of the bones varied, but each showed gnaw marks consistent with human dentition, albeit with abnormalities. The forensics lab was baffled by the elongated shape of the bite marks, which suggested a jaw structure not typical of any normal human. For Carla, it confirmed her worst suspicions. The thing she saw in the vents was responsible. And it was still at large. She delved into old, obscure records, searching for any historical parallels. Urban legends, perhaps. She discovered references to alleged sightings of a pale man in Chicago's Lower Wacker Drive area dating back to the 1920s. Those accounts were mostly chalked up to boogeyman tales told by those living in the city's underbelly. But the common threats, pallid skin, inhuman speed, unsettled her. Brophy tried to remain rational. Could it be some disease? A person with a genetic disorder who's lived underground, feeding on, I don't know, animals at first, then moving on to humans? Carla didn't have a good answer. If so, it's unbelievably strong and fast, and cunning enough to remain hidden for years. They were stumped. Meanwhile, tip calls flooded in about strange sightings in the Chicago Riverwalk, the old freight tunnels under the Loop, the CTA subway lines. Most were baseless or unsubstantiated. Carla and Brophy followed up on a few more credible leads but found no solid evidence. The tension grew. No one wanted to believe some monstrous predator lurked in the city, yet the facts were impossible to ignore. Then, about a week after the meatpacking plant raid, there was another disappearance. A teenage girl named Brittany Martin vanished after leaving her job at a coffee shop near Union Station. Security cameras showed her walking down West Adams Street, then turning onto a side street. She never arrived home. A new wave of fear seized the department. Carla and Brophy took the lead. They combed through security footage from surrounding businesses. Most of it showed nothing unusual, just the girl walking alone. But one camera, mounted behind a loading dock, captured a fleeting silhouette near the edge of the frame. A pale limb, elongated fingers retreating into the darkness. Carla's skin crawled. The footage was blurry, the angle poor, but it was enough to hint the figure resembled the same thing from the plant. A memory flared of that contorted face scuttling into the vents. She and Brophy stared at the footage repeatedly, trying to glean any detail. Look at the height, Carla pointed out, pausing on the shape. It's crouched, but the arm is so long. That can't be normal. Brophy exhaled. We need to find it before more people go missing. The mayor is on us. The captain is on us. Everyone's terrified. Carla set her jaw. We'll coordinate with the transit police and see if we can sweep underground tunnels. It had to have gone somewhere. The next few days were a frenzy of law enforcement activity. The CPD joined forces with CTA security, scanning the subways at night. Cadaver dogs were deployed to sniff for traces of human remains in service tunnels. Meanwhile, Carla's nightmares grew worse. She kept seeing that pale face, hearing the inhuman wail in the dark. Still, no direct trace surfaced. Morale dipped. The media christened the suspect the Chicago Cryptid, fueling speculation that overshadowed legitimate police work. Carla tried to keep the investigation grounded. Each day, she'd review the leads, cross-reference missing persons, and push the forensics lab for any scrap of insight about the unusual bite marks. One morning, an email arrived in Carla's inbox from a researcher at the Field Museum. He had read the news stories and wanted to speak to her privately, claiming he had historical data about similar incidents. Carla was skeptical, but desperation spurred her to set up a meeting. She drove to the Field Museum after hours, ignoring the light drizzle that slicked Lakeshore Drive. The majestic building stood near Lake Michigan, illuminated by floodlights. She had arranged to meet the researcher, Dr. Adrian Fletcher, in a side office near the museum's back entrance. Once inside, she found him to be a reedy man in his 50s with wire-rimmed glasses and a cautious demeanor. "Detective Meza," he greeted softly. "Thank you for coming. I read about your discovery in Fulton Market. I believe I can offer some context." She sat down in a cramped office lined with shelves of anthropology texts and old artifacts. "I'm listening." Dr. Fletcher retrieved a folder filled with yellowed documents and photographs. "I study Chicago's urban folklore as part of a cultural anthropology project. Some stories, repeated over decades, contain seeds of truth. One recurring legend references a pale, human-like creature dwelling in abandoned tunnels and basements. The earliest mention I found dates back to 1885, in the old Chicago stockyards. Workers claimed that a ghoul was snatching livestock and even a few night watchmen. The accounts describe an emaciated figure with elongated limbs and a strange, rasping breath." Carla shivered. "That's eerily consistent with what we've seen." Fletcher nodded grimly. Later, there were sporadic sightings near the city's underriver tunnels, and during the Great Depression, rumors spread among the homeless population living in the freight tunnels under the loop. They claimed that if you wandered alone, you might never return, taken by something in the shadows. Carla frowned, feeling a chill. "You think it's the same entity all these years?" He pushed a grainy black and white photo across the desk. "Look at this. It was taken in 1932 by a WPA photographer documenting living conditions in the underground shantytowns. If you squint, you can see a pale figure lurking near the left edge of the frame. Most historians dismissed it as a trick of the light. But you compare it to your case and the parallels are uncanny." Carla studied the photo. Indeed, there was a faint shape, elongated and white at the edge. Could it be the same being decades apart? It seemed impossible. She reminded herself that a serial killer might adopt a mythic persona, but that still didn't explain the inhuman agility and the timeline stretching over a century. Dr. Fletcher cleared his throat. "I can't claim to know exactly what it is. Perhaps it's a reclusive, diseased individual. Or it might be something less explainable by modern science. But the pattern is consistent. It hunts alone, takes victims who wander solitary at night, and leaves little trace behind. The sightings cluster around the city's industrial and subterranean zones." Carla felt equal parts gratitude and dread. She thanked Fletcher for the information, promising to keep him updated. The storm outside seemed heavier when she exited, raindrops pounding the pavement. She stood near the museum steps, watching Lake Michigan churn under the night sky, her mind spinning. Could it be that they were dealing with some creature older than anyone realized? She returned to the station with the new intel. Brophy seemed open-minded if skeptical. "Even if it is a 100-year-old story, we still have to approach this like a manhunt. We have a physical suspect." Carla nodded, but inside she wasn't so sure. A break in the case occurred 2 nights later. Dispatch received frantic 911 calls from a maintenance worker in the old post office complex near the Chicago River. He claimed something attacked him in the sub-basement. Squad cars raced to the location with Carla and Brophy at the forefront. The building in question, the old Chicago Main Post Office on West Van Buren Street, was massive and partially redeveloped after years of vacancy. Some parts remained dark and deserted. The worker who called 911 was found trembling near a freight elevator. He babbled about a ghoul with sunken eyes, lunging at him from a corner, hissing. He managed to fend it off with a metal pipe, sustaining a nasty scratch across his forearm. Carla and Brophy, along with half a dozen officers, descended to the sub-basement. The old corridors were dimly lit and labyrinthine, with whirring industrial fans and flickering fluorescent lights. The K9 unit accompanied them, dogs sniffing the stale air. Almost immediately, one of the dogs began whining, refusing to proceed beyond a certain door. That only heightened Carla's anxiety. They pressed on. The corridors echoed with their footsteps. Suddenly, the lead officer signaled for silence. Everyone froze. A scraping noise reverberated from behind a row of large pipes. The group spread out, weapons drawn, flashlights piercing the darkness. Carla's heart pounded. If it was here, they had to be prepared. Out of nowhere, the figure burst from behind the pipes with terrifying speed, crossing the corridor in a blur. Shots rang out, muzzle flashes illuminating the monstrous form. The creature skittered on all fours for a moment, then leaped onto a vertical stack of crates, climbing with frantic agility. Carla had a brief, horrifying glimpse: pale, sinewy limbs, an emaciated torso, a face twisted by some primal hunger. Bullets sprayed overhead, sparks flying as they ricocheted off metal. Officers scrambled for cover. The creature hissed, a high-pitched sound that made Carla's hair stand on end. She aimed her gun, trying to steady her shaking hands. The thing perched on top of the crates, glaring down with reflective eyes. Then it sprang across the corridor, landing out of sight behind a large boiler tank. Another volley of shots rang out. An officer shouted, "I think I hit it." Brophy barked orders to surround the area. They advanced in a coordinated sweep. Carla's pulse thundered as she checked corners, flashlight beam shaking. Another hiss echoed. She glimpsed movement overhead, the creature crawling along exposed ceiling beams. A single drop of thick, dark fluid dripped down, splattering on the floor at her feet. Blood, she realized. They had wounded it. "Up there," she shouted, shining her light. The figure snarled, bearing an array of jagged teeth. This close, its eyes were milky white like cataracts. Its elongated fingers gripped the beam. Carla fired, hearing the shot echo in the confined space. She wasn't sure if she connected. The creature shrieked, leaping to the far wall. It crashed through a rusted grate that led to an adjacent ventilation duct. Officers sprinted to the duct, but it was too late. The suspect was gone, leaving behind a smear of dark blood on the metal edges. Panting, Carla stepped back, adrenaline surging. They'd cornered it, possibly wounded it, yet it still escaped. Most of the officers wore expressions of disbelief. Brophy's face was pale. They quickly set up a perimeter, searching every inch of the basement. The K-9 units followed the blood trail for a short distance into the ductwork, but then it vanished, lost in the labyrinth of old utility tunnels. Despite a massive overnight effort, there was no further sign. Still, the fact that it bled offered a slim measure of hope. Perhaps it wasn't immortal or invincible. Carla tried to hold on to that thought, ignoring the creeping horror that what they fought wasn't fully human. In the aftermath, official channels tried to spin the event as a fugitive confrontation. But word leaked out among the officers. This was no ordinary suspect. Some started calling it the Pale Man, referencing the rumors. Others whispered about vampires or supernatural entities. Tensions ran high. The city was on edge with each new rumor. Captain Graves, typically stoic, looked rattled when Carla and Brophy briefed him in his office. "So we wounded it, but it escaped again." "Great. The mayor's office wants results. They're threatening to bring in the FBI or National Guard if we can't contain this." Brophy sighed, leaning on the captain's desk. "Bringing in the feds might not help. They'll think we're all insane. But we need more manpower. The thing is moving through old tunnels, sub-basements, places we can't easily search." Graves rubbed his temple. "Fine. I'll see about specialized teams. We've done citywide alerts for potential sightings. God help us if it decides to go on another spree. Detective Meza, any insights from that museum fellow?" Carla shook her head. "He only confirmed the pattern. This thing's existed in the city's shadows for decades, maybe longer. We tried conventional tactics. It's elusive, possibly inhuman. I'm not sure how else to proceed." Graves exhaled in frustration. "Keep me posted." That night, Carla found herself unable to sleep. She read old police files from the 1970s about unsolved murders near the old stockyards, flipping through black and white crime scene photos. So many parallels. Victims found with bite marks, bodies partially dragged into sewers. The files all ended inconclusively with speculation about a predator, human or animal. She realized that each generation simply gave up, burying the truth. Now it fell to her to solve the puzzle or risk letting it continue its reign of terror. As the city reeled with talk of a monstrous killer, a strange hush descended on the night streets. Businesses in certain neighborhoods posted earlier closing hours. People walked in groups. Taxi drivers and rideshare apps reported a drop in passengers after midnight, with folks afraid to wander alone. The mayor gave a press conference urging calm, stating that the CPD was handling an ongoing investigation. Behind the scenes, Carla and Brophy led a specialized task force. They mapped out every known subterranean route: old freight tunnels, sewer lines, service corridors. The city's infrastructure was a labyrinth, built and rebuilt over more than a century. If the creature could navigate those tunnels, it could appear anywhere. They set up motion sensors at known entry points, installed cameras in some areas. It felt like a war waged underground with no guarantee of success. One night, an alert sounded from a motion sensor placed in an abandoned stretch of the pedway system downtown, a network of tunnels and walkways connecting buildings. A team rushed over but found only a disturbed grate and claw-like scratches on the concrete. The creature had apparently sensed the trap. Day after day, new leads cropped up, each fizzling out. Carla's nightmares intensified. She dreamt of wandering the meatpacking district alone, hearing dripping water, then seeing that pale figure crawl toward her from the shadows. She'd wake up in a cold sweat, struggling to calm her pounding heart. Brophy tried to keep morale up, but he too showed signs of strain. Each time they got close, the creature slipped away. He hypothesized it might sense electromagnetic devices, or it was just exceptionally cunning. Carla didn't dispute either possibility. Eventually the tipping point came. Another missing person was reported, a 30-something schoolteacher named Thomas Jansen. He'd left a bar near the Magnificent Mile around 11 p.m. His fiancée said he never made it home. Security cameras caught a glimpse of him near the Chicago Riverwalk, walking alone by the water, then stepping onto a side path that led under some bridges. The last footage showed a flicker of movement behind him, something pale that the camera couldn't fully capture. The city erupted with panic. Another abduction. Another victim. Carla felt a surge of fierce determination. She and Brophy pored over maps of the Riverwalk's lower levels, concluding that the suspect likely used an old drainage outflow near the Lake Street Bridge. They organized a nighttime operation, stationing officers along the river's subterranean service walkways. The plan was risky. They'd lure the creature out with a staged scenario, a solitary figure wandering near the drain, while concealed teams waited to pounce. Carla volunteered to be the decoy, feeling a twisted sense of responsibility to bring this to an end. Brophy protested, but eventually relented when she insisted she was best prepared. On a cold, drizzly night, Carla found herself walking alone along a dimly lit portion of the Riverwalk. She wore plain clothes, a small mic taped under her jacket collar, and a concealed sidearm. The rest of the task force, hidden behind walls and around corners, listened via earpiece. The river was black, shimmering with the reflection of city lights. Rain pattered the water's surface, and the wind whipped in swirling gusts. Her footsteps echoed as she passed under the Lake Street Bridge. The city's nighttime hum seemed far above, detached. Down here the air was cooler, the environment lonely. She occasionally whispered updates into her mic. Nothing yet. She advanced another 30 yards. The plan was to appear tipsy, a vulnerable target. She feigned slight stumbling, hoping the creature would take the bait. Minutes ticked by. No sign. Her heart pounded. She waited near an entrance to a disused drainage tunnel that forensics believed connected to a network of hidden passages. Rainwater trickled in, forming puddles at her feet. Thunder rumbled from somewhere overhead. A faint splash made her tense. She turned to look behind her, nothing but the dark river swirling by. Then came a soft scraping from inside the drainage tunnel. She forced herself not to whip her head around too fast. Slowly she peered into the gloom. Her earpiece crackled with Brophy's voice. "Detect anything?" "Sound from inside," she whispered, stepping back slightly. Her instincts screamed to flee. But this was part of the plan. They had a net of officers ready to converge at her signal. She drew a quiet breath, bracing herself. Then something emerged from the mouth of the tunnel. A pale shape, crouched low, eyes glinting in the faint light. Carla's stomach lurched. Even from a distance, she recognized the gaunt silhouette. For a moment, time slowed. The creature sniffed the air, almost as if testing for a trap. Carla remained motionless, heart hammering. It advanced, elongated limbs moving with predatory grace. She saw the faint gleam of water dripping from its pallid flesh. Her mic picked up her accelerated breathing. She made herself appear startled, stumbling backward. The creature hissed softly, rising onto two legs. This was the moment. Carla pressed the hidden button on her mic, signaling the rest of the team to converge. She expected a swarm of officers in seconds. But the creature sensed the ambush. Its head snapped up, glaring at the surrounding walkways. With a shriek, it launched itself sideways, clinging to the stone wall like an insect. Carla raised her concealed weapon, firing 2 quick shots. At least one seemed to hit, judging by the spray of dark fluid that spattered the wall. It howled, a high-pitched screech that echoed under the bridge. Suddenly, bright beams of flashlights and laser sights converged on it from all directions as officers emerged. Shots rang out. In a blur of movement, the creature leaped from wall to wall, bullets sparking off the stone. It scrambled up, nearly reaching the underside of the bridge. One of the SWAT officers managed to land a shot that sent it tumbling onto the walkway with a thud. For a split second it lay there, limbs twitching. Carla's heart soared with hope. Then it rose again, slower this time, an ugly wound gaping on its torso. Blood, dark, almost black, gushed. Officers closed in with weapons drawn, shouting commands. The creature let out another piercing shriek, turning its milky eyes toward Carla. She felt a chill of primal fear. Brophy yelled, "Taser!" Another officer fired the taser darts, hitting it squarely. The thing convulsed, collapsing. It spasmed, slapping the ground with elongated fingers. The sight was grotesque and pitiful all at once. Carla had to fight the urge to look away. SWAT officers moved in cautiously, thick zip ties and additional taser at the ready. The creature snapped at them, razor-like teeth bared. With disciplined teamwork, they pinned its limbs, secured its wrists behind its back, if you could call those wrists. More taser blasts ensured it remained too disoriented to resist. The stench of burnt flesh filled Carla's nostrils, adding to the horror of the moment. She felt her stomach twist. Yet they'd done it, they had captured the monstrous being. An ambulance was called, though no one was quite sure how to treat it medically. The paramedics approached warily, eventually deciding to sedate it with a powerful tranquilizer. They had no protocol for something like this. Carla stood by Brophy, heart still hammering as the tranquilized creature lay on the wet concrete, chest heaving in shallow, rapid breaths. Up close, it was more hideous than she imagined. Grayish-white skin stretched taut, veins visible beneath the surface, joints that bent at unnatural angles. Officers snapped a flurry of photos. Everyone was on edge, uncertain if it might suddenly regain strength. Once it was sedated enough to cease struggling, it was strapped onto a gurney inside a specialized containment unit. Carla overheard the paramedics muttering about taking it to Rush University Medical Center under heavy guard. Meanwhile, the press had caught wind of the commotion near the Riverwalk. Reporters were blocked by squads of officers, but they clamored for details from behind police tape. Brophy exhaled heavily, adrenaline fading. We actually got it. Carla nodded, hardly believing it herself. Yes. But what do we do now? No one had a real answer. The chain of command would have to scramble. They couldn't book it like a normal suspect. Yet it had committed multiple murders, if that even made sense in conventional legal terms. Carla's thoughts drifted to the families of the missing. They deserved closure. She hoped the remains in the meatpacking plant and other sites could be matched to loved ones so they could have answers. But what about explaining this being? Captain Graves arrived at the scene in plain clothes, face drawn. He conferred quietly with SWAT command, then approached Carla and Brophy. "You did good," he said, voice strained. "But we have a new problem. The mayor is on the phone with the governor. The media frenzy is going to be insane. People can't handle this kind of truth." Brophy shook his head in disbelief. "We have evidence. We can't just cover this up." Graves frowned. "Not saying we bury it. But we need an official line that doesn't cause mass hysteria. The higher-ups are suggesting we claim it's a severely disfigured, mentally ill individual, a possible cannibal. They want to bury the idea of anything supernatural. The city can't handle that narrative." Carla bristled but understood the political reality. She just hoped they wouldn't sabotage the rightful investigation. The entire department was already over its head. For now, they had the monstrous suspect in custody. That was a start. She and Brophy rode with the convoy to Rush University Medical Center, lights flashing. A specialized wing of the hospital was cleared. Armed officers guarded the perimeter. Inside, doctors and surgeons prepped to treat the wounded creature, though they looked terrified. Carla watched through thick glass as the team gingerly cut away its ragged garments, hooking it up to monitors. The heart rate was bizarrely high, body temperature low. Blood tests, once performed, might yield shocking anomalies. Hours passed in a haze of confusion. The official statement to the press was carefully worded. A serial killer suspect has been apprehended. The individual was severely deformed and extremely violent. Investigations are ongoing. Meanwhile, city leaders braced for the public reaction. Carla wondered if they might hush it further, but smartphones had captured glimpses and rumor sites exploded with theories. Some believed it was a hoax. Others claimed it was an alien. The real truth felt somewhere in between. In the days that followed, the creature remained heavily sedated in a secure medical ward. Carla and Brophy, along with a handful of top officials, were granted limited supervised access. A hush order came down. No photos or recordings allowed. The mayor's office and the governor's office demanded secrecy. Meanwhile, forensics teams tested the being's blood, tissue samples, and dental impressions. Carla visited the secure ward every day, trying to glean any insight. The being looked frilier than when it lurked in the shadows. Restrained, tubes and 4 lines snaking from its limbs, it seemed almost pitiful. But she remembered the horrors it inflicted. She had no sympathy. She wanted answers. Why did it kill? How long had it lived under the city? Each attempt to question it was met with silence or unintelligible snarls. The medical staff had found that it possessed vocal cords ill-suited for human speech. Its vital signs barely aligned with normal human ranges. The sedation made it docile, but each time they lowered the dosage, it became wildly aggressive. They couldn't risk it breaking free. Behind the scenes, top brass quietly assigned a team of experts, some from federal agencies, to examine the case. Carla felt overshadowed yet still integral. She had tracked it, shot it, helped capture it. Brophy stood by her side, sharing the same mixture of relief and existential dread. Evidence at the old meatpacking plant led to identifications of at least 10 victims, bringing closure to families that had agonized for years. Similar remains from other subterranean sites were matched through DNA. The body count soared past 30. The city reeled as families learned their lost loved ones had fallen prey to a monstrous predator. Captain Graves, with forced optimism, told Carla and Brophy, "At least we stopped it from claiming more lives." Still, she sensed lingering uncertainty. Had they caught the only one of its kind? Or were there more lurking in the deeper tunnels? She tried not to dwell on that possibility. Everyone wanted to believe this was a solitary abomination. Then came the final twist no one saw coming. Late one night, the medical ward security alarms blared. Carla and Brophy, who had just finished a double shift, were alerted by text and rushed to the hospital. Chaos reigned in the corridor. 2 guards lay injured, and the door to the creature's room stood open. Thick claw marks marred the metal frame. They found the inside in shambles: overturned medical equipment, a cracked window. The bed was empty, restraints shredded. The staff cowered in a corner, unhurt but terrified. A hysterical nurse sobbed that the sedation had failed. The creature awakened stronger, more enraged. It brutally attacked the guards, then fled. Carla's stomach dropped. She sprinted down the corridor, hearing commotion from a stairwell. Another guard lay unconscious. Trails of dark blood, both human and the creature's, led down the steps. She and Brophy followed the blood, joined by a wave of responding officers. The path ended at a service exit in the basement. The heavy steel door was wrenched off its hinges. Outside, a quiet, moonlit parking lot glimmered with broken glass. A twisted metal fence indicated the creature forced its way through, disappearing into the night. Shock rippled through the department. They'd underestimated its resilience. Freed from sedation and presumably enraged by captivity, the creature had escaped. More transmissions soared across police channels, urging immediate lockdown of the area. Units scoured the surrounding neighborhoods. Helicopters with searchlights combed the streets near the hospital. All in vain. It vanished into the city once more. Despair weighed on Carla's chest. They had come so far only to lose it again. And now it might be more dangerous than ever. She remembered the battered man they'd rescued from the plant, the photos of the missing, the bones in the sub-basement. If it struck again, the blame would rest heavily on their shoulders. The city was back in peril. The morning news broke the story: deformed suspect in serial killings escapes hospital. Panic spread. Phone lines at the CPD jammed with frightened callers. City leaders demanded a swift recapture. But how? They had used every resource only to watch it slip away. Carla closed her eyes, exhaustion pressing on her. She felt trapped in a nightmare with no end. Seemingly confirming the public's worst fears, the creature's next attack came the following night. A homeless man near the Dan Ryan Expressway was found savagely mauled, barely alive, describing a white demon that came out of nowhere. He died hours later from massive blood loss. Security cameras from a nearby underpass captured a fleeting glimpse of a pale figure bounding into darkness. The city's terror reached new heights. In an emergency meeting with the mayor, the police commissioner, and the governor's liaison, a drastic plan was proposed. A citywide curfew after 9 p.m., National Guard on standby, thorough sweeps of potential hideouts. Carla disliked martial law tactics but saw no alternative. The creature was unstoppable otherwise, and the public demanded action. Brophy joined her in a second wave of raids targeting known subterranean access points. The stench of fear permeated the department. Some rookies quietly resigned rather than face this monstrosity. Others carried extra ammo, superstitious tokens, or even crosses. Rumors spread that the creature was invulnerable. Carla knew it could be hurt, but killing or containing it seemed nearly impossible. As curfew descended on Chicago, normally vibrant nightlife districts became ghost towns. The Magnificent Mile lay empty, shutters pulled down. CTA trains ran with minimal passengers. The air was tense, as if the entire metropolis was holding its breath. Still no sign of the creature. Days passed. Then a cryptic phone call came into the CPD tip line. A raspy voice claimed it had seen the monster entering the old Union stockyards on the south side, near the Gate of Death historical site. The stockyards, once the world's largest meat processing center, had mostly closed by 1971. Now it was a sprawl of industrial ruins and partial redevelopment. Carla's instincts flared. The stockyards area was historically connected to the earliest sightings. It was also riddled with subterranean levels, old rails and service tunnels. She and Brophy decided to check it out, leading a small but heavily armed team. By then, the department understood large squads made it cautious. Perhaps a smaller team moving swiftly had a better chance. Under cloudy skies, they arrived at the crumbling gates marking the old stockyards. The area was eerie, rusted structures looming in the gloom. The stench of decay lingered in the air, although the livestock pens had been gone for decades. Carla recalled the stories Dr. Fletcher had shared. If any place might draw the creature, it was here. They navigated the broken pavement, scanning each building with flashlights. The area was partially fenced, but open sections allowed them to move inside. The silence felt oppressive. Carla's footsteps echoed. Brophy signaled for quiet as they approached a dilapidated building with boarded windows. A single sign reading South Packing Company hung precariously. The tip caller had mentioned seeing the creature near this building's basement entrance. They found a rusted door at ground level, forced open. Inside, darkness swallowed them. The stench of mildew and old blood, whether from decades ago or more recent kills, clung to the air. They advanced carefully, guns at the ready. Officer Riley was with them again. She noticed footprints in the dust leading downward. "We've got a path here." Adrenaline surged. They followed the tracks into a labyrinth of corridors. Water dripped from overhead pipes, the same watery echo that haunted Carla's nightmares. The deeper they went, the more it resembled the Fulton Market building. Rusty meat hooks overhead, peeling paint, scattered debris. Finally, they emerged into a large subterranean chamber once used for slaughter. The room's center featured a massive drain. Carla fought a wave of nausea thinking about its grim history. A scuttling sound froze them. Weapons rose. The scuttling came again from above. Carla shined her flashlight up. There, on a steel support beam near the ceiling, crouched the creature, glaring down with hateful eyes. It bared its teeth in a silent snarl, wounds still visible from the hospital escape. Blood matted its side. Shots thundered as half the team fired reflexively. The creature jumped, bounding across beams, avoiding most bullets. Sparks flew. Screams bounced off concrete walls. Carla aimed carefully, letting out a controlled burst. She saw it flinch, might have clipped it. Then it dropped down behind a stack of crates. The team spread out in a pincer movement. Brophy lobbed a flashbang over the crates. The deafening blast and bright flash lit the chamber. Carla rushed in, bracing for a fight. The creature was waiting, leaping at them with claws extended. One officer went down, shrieking as claws raked his vest. Carla fired point blank, her ears ringing. Bullets tore into the creature's torso. It reeled, screeching. Brophy fired a shotgun round. The impact drove it back into a pile of debris. It lay still for a second, body jerking. Carla advanced, ignoring the officer's moans. She aimed at the creature's head. They couldn't risk sedation again. This had to end. Her finger tightened on the trigger. The creature's eyes snapped open, a final hiss escaping its blood-stained mouth. It lunged forward, forcing Carla to fire. Muzzle flash illuminated a grisly scene as bullets pierced its skull. With one last spasm, it collapsed, body going limp. Smoke curled from Carla's gun barrel. Her ears rang. The entire team rushed in, surrounding the creature, guns trained. It didn't move. Dark blood pooled around the grotesque form. Brophy crouched, checking its pulse, if it even had one. He shook his head. It's done. Carla's arms trembled, the realization crashing down. The nightmare ended in a hail of bullets. The unstoppable monster, a century-long horror, lay dead under flickering flashlights. Relief warred with lingering horror. She averted her gaze from its shattered skull, swallowing back bile. Paramedics tended the injured officer, who survived thanks to his protective vest. Carla sank to her knees, adrenaline draining. Brophy put a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You did it." Outside, the Chicago night lay heavy, but for once Carla felt the city might breathe easier. They radioed it in. The creature was confirmed down. The official line would call it a serial killer, genetically deformed, extremely violent. Regardless of the spin, the threat was finally neutralized. The evidence, its corpse, would confirm the unimaginable truth. The mayor and captain arrived soon after, eerily quiet in the face of the monstrous remains. Officials whisked the corpse away for special autopsy. Carla didn't care about the politics anymore. She and Brophy had saved lives. In the days that followed, Chicago slowly returned to normalcy. The curfew lifted, businesses reopened at night, and people emerged from their homes. The Pale Man became an urban legend once more, though official statements never fully acknowledged its inhuman nature. The families of its victims took some solace knowing the culprit was gone. Carla resumed her routine detective work, but she was forever changed. Nightmares still plagued her, memories of that pale face in the vents. Yet she took comfort in the fact that, for the first time in decades, no one else would vanish under mysterious circumstances in the old industrial shadows. A hush fell over the labyrinth of tunnels, the monstrous occupant gone. Sometimes in her quieter moments, she'd reflect on Dr. Fletcher's words and the old black and white photos. Had it really been the same creature haunting Chicago for over a century? Perhaps there were more left undiscovered. The city was ancient in its foundations, labyrinthine in its sprawl. She hoped the terror ended with that final kill. Deep inside she couldn't be entirely sure. But for now the Chicago Police Department had done its job. It was a humid summer evening in Paris when Clara Sullivan stepped off the metro at Denfert-Trochereau station, heart thudding with both excitement and dread. She was here in pursuit of a story that had begun as rumor and speculation, whispered among locals and tourists alike. Unlike most travelers heading for the catacombs, she carried not just curiosity but a journalist's determination to uncover facts. A seasoned freelance reporter, Clara had grown tired of the usual fluff pieces. She yearned for something gritty, something that might expose the hidden veins of Paris's soul. The possibility of uncovering a genuine mystery thrilled her. Over the last month, Clara had followed threads on internet forums about strange disappearances linked to illicit catacombs explorations. Locals muttered about voices in empty tunnels, suspicious gatherings, and a rise in missing persons reports among adventurous youths who dared to enter the off-limits sections at night. Officially, the catacombs closed well before sundown, but rumors persisted of individuals slipping inside after hours. According to speculation, some never returned. The police rarely confirmed anything. Their stance was that the catacombs were dangerous and should be avoided, but no organized criminal operation was believed to exist down there. Clara remained unconvinced. As she exited the station, she paused near a large map posted by the entrance. It depicted the streets radiating outward. Tourists crowded an area across the boulevard where the official entrance to the Paris catacombs stood. She saw a line of people waiting to descend into the popular legal route, where thousands of bones were stacked in neat rows behind barricades and mood lighting. Clara had taken that official tour once years ago, and remembered its controlled environment. This time, her target was a far darker place, sections barred to the public, stretching miles beneath the city's surface. Just that morning, Clara had arranged a meeting with an elusive contact known only as Lyon, a self-described cataphile who explored clandestine corners of the Undercity. He claimed to know a deeper route, one leading to a chamber where strange graffiti and stolen relics pointed to recent human activity, not mere centuries-old remains. Lyon had demanded secrecy. He didn't trust outsiders but seemed motivated by a sense of civic duty, or so he claimed. Clara guessed he had other reasons, perhaps a guilty conscience after seeing something that rattled him. Checking her phone, she noticed a text. "Meet me behind the bakery, 44 Rue Daguerre. 6 p.m. alone." She made her way through the lively neighborhood, past shops with bright awnings. The air smelled of bread and cheese, overlaying the city's warm summer scent. Yet beneath that comforting veneer, tension skittered in her veins. This was more than a local legend. If the missing person rumors were true, real peril lurked below. Arriving at the bakery's back alley, Clara found a lean, dark-haired man leaning against a graffitied wall. A battered backpack hung from his shoulder. He caught her eye and gave a brisk nod. This had to be Lyon. He seemed on edge, scanning for eavesdroppers. Without greeting, he jerked his chin, beckoning her to follow. Clara stepped closer, tucking her notepad into her purse. "You're the journalist?" he asked in accented English. "Yes, Clara. We messaged earlier." His gaze flicked over her, measuring. "You brought no one else?" She shook her head. "I'm here alone. Look, if you'd prefer to speak elsewhere." "No time," he interrupted. "If you want to see the real catacombs, we go now." They walked 2 blocks in silence. Clara's heart pounded. She mentally rehearsed her plan. Get in, gather evidence, stay close to Lyon, remain calm. She had read about accidents, people losing their way in unlit tunnels. This was not a casual stroll. She touched the camera tucked into her purse, reassuring herself she'd at least capture some footage. Soon they reached a quiet street near Place d'Enfrotrochereau. Lyon turned down a small lane lined with older buildings. At the end, hidden behind a metal trash bin, a battered hatch in the ground was visible. He crouched down, used a crowbar to pry it open, then glanced back, face tense. Clara hesitated for a breath. One final chance to back out. But she couldn't. This was her story. She nodded, and Lyon descended into the darkness. Steadying herself, she followed. The air inside was immediately cooler, with a damp smell that hinted at centuries of hidden corridors. Her pulse quickened. She hoped she was prepared for whatever secrets waited below. The narrow ladder groaned under their weight as they climbed down into the tunnel. The meager light from Clara's headlamp revealed dripping limestone walls that dated back to Roman times, or so she had read. Water trickled underfoot, forming a slick film on the stone floor. Once at the bottom, Lyon yanked the metal hatch shut, plunging them into near-total darkness broken only by the beams of their flashlights. "This way," he said tersely, stepping through a low arch. Clara followed, the passage just wide enough to walk single file. She adjusted her headlamp for a broader glow, feeling immediate claustrophobia in these tight quarters. The city above felt very far away. "What exactly did you see down here?" she asked, voice echoing off the tunnel walls. She tried to keep it casual but couldn't mask the tension in her tone. Lyon's answer was clipped. "Signs of gatherings. Candles, strange symbols, scraps of clothing. People who shouldn't be here." "And you mentioned missing persons?" He grunted in acknowledgement. "A friend of mine used to explore with me, Matthew. We found an area full of fresh footprints leading to a sealed door. Next day Matthew came alone, said he'd push further. He never came back. Gendarmes looked for him, found nothing. I tried my own search. It only led me to locked gates. Then I discovered rumors about others vanishing. That's why I reached out online." An uneasy shiver raked Clara's spine. She had read about explorers vanishing. Official channels called them accidents. But the idea of a group using these tunnels for sinister purposes was even more chilling. They pressed on. Occasionally, the corridor opened into small chambers stacked high with bones, skulls and femurs arranged in neat patterns. In the publicly accessible catacombs, these displays were curated, well-lit, and safe for tourists. Here, left in darkness, they felt raw and unsettling. The skulls seemed to watch them pass, silent witnesses to centuries of the city's dead. She tried not to dwell on the layers of mortal remains around her. After about 20 minutes, Lyon paused at a fork where the passage branched in 3 directions. He pulled out a hand-drawn map, lines crossing in a spidery grid. "The area I found is this way," he said, indicating the left tunnel. "We'll pass an old quarry section used by cataphiles, then we'll see fresh graffiti. That's where it starts." They continued, the air growing colder. Pools of standing water forced them to sidestep slippery patches. Their footsteps and hushed voices reverberated eerily. Clara checked her phone's signal. Nothing. She'd expected that, but still felt a pang of apprehension. No contact with the surface if something went wrong. Faint scrawls of graffiti began to appear on the walls. Names, dates, the occasional stylized drawing. Some looked decades old. Others were fresh in bright spray paint. Ahead, the tunnel widened into an open space with a low ceiling. It was littered with empty beer cans and a ragged old couch. A makeshift party spot, presumably. Lyon pointed to an exit on the far side. Past that threshold, the atmosphere changed. The corridor was narrower, more oppressive. Clara's headlamp flickered across something red and black painted on the wall. A stylized serpent coiled around a human figure with an X slashed through its chest. She inhaled sharply. The style was unsettling, modern but weirdly archaic in subject. Next to it, a date had been scribbled, May 2023, not even 2 months prior. Lyon's voice dropped to a whisper. "The first time I saw this, I felt a presence like someone was watching. Even now, I sense it. Do you?" Clara tried to steady herself. "I'm not sure," she murmured. But she felt uneasy. The darkness seemed alive with possibility. Her mind conjured shapes in the gloom, half expecting someone to leap out. She clutched her flashlight tighter. They trudged on. The path led to a gate made of rusted metal bars. It was locked. Lyon pulled a ring of keys from his backpack. She raised an eyebrow. He explained in a hushed tone, "I got these from a friend who once worked for the city." He took duplicates of old maintenance keys. After several attempts, one key turned. The lock clicked. He eased the gate open with a metallic groan. Beyond the gate, the corridor sloped downward. An unpleasant odor drifted from somewhere ahead, stale, organic, vaguely reminiscent of rot. Clara swallowed hard, forcing her feet forward. Here the water seemed deeper, nearly lapping at their ankles. The uneven ground made progress slow. Her nerves jangled. If there was any real danger down here, they were as good as trapped. Lyon paused again. "We must be close," he said softly, shining his flashlight on the map. His voice shook slightly. Clara realized he was scared too. The beam of her headlamp landed on a small mound of rubble up ahead. Something lay half-submerged, pale in the water. Her pulse spiked. She advanced, dread pooling in her gut. The object was a sneaker, coated in slimy mud, lying next to what looked like torn fabric. No foot attached, just the shoe. Her breath caught. She glanced at Lyon, whose face had gone pale. "Matthew wore shoes like these," he said quietly. "Same brand, I think." A hush descended. Clara felt her stomach clench, fear stirring. She snapped a quick photo. If that belonged to a missing person, it was evidence or perhaps a warning. She realized they had to be extremely cautious. Something was deeply wrong in these forbidden tunnels. Yet she pressed on, compelled by the story, by the need to find answers before more people vanished. The unsettling discovery weighed on them as they continued deeper. A few dozen steps later, the corridor opened into a wider chamber dotted with irregular stone pillars supporting the ceiling. Lyon motioned for Clara to kill her headlamp. She hesitated but complied, heart pounding in the sudden darkness. He flicked off his own flashlight for a moment, letting their eyes adjust. Dim flickers of light danced on the far side of the chamber. Candles. Clara silently exhaled, realizing someone else was indeed here. The faint glow cast long shadows, revealing maybe half a dozen thick candles set on a ledge. She could make out vague shapes, an altar-like table, something draped over it. Her instinct screamed danger. Lyon crept forward, hugging the damp wall. Clara followed, placing each step with care to avoid splashes in the shallow water. The candlelit area was partially enclosed by old quarry stone, forming a nook. She heard soft murmurs, voices, though she couldn't make out the language. Fear and excitement waged war within her. She was about to witness something clandestine, perhaps the explanation behind the vanishings. Reaching a vantage point behind a stone pillar, she peeked around. 3 figures in dark clothing stood near the flickering candles, facing the makeshift table. The table itself appeared to be a slab of broken limestone. On it lay an array of objects, a battered wooden crucifix, some old bones, and a modern-looking photograph pinned by a dagger. Clara squinted, trying to see details. Her stomach flipped when she realized the photo showed a smiling young woman, possibly one of the missing individuals. One figure poured liquid from a small jar onto the bones. Another chanted softly, words lost in the echoes. The third person raised a slender blade and placed it carefully onto the table. The atmosphere felt charged, as though they were enacting some ritual. Clara's journalistic instincts urged her to record this. She fumbled for her phone, turning the camera lens around the pillar, but the darkness made it tough. She took a few low-light shots anyway, hands shaking. Then, abruptly, the chanting halted. The figure holding the blade turned as though sensing a presence. The flickering candlelight illuminated a thin face, features contorted by intense emotion. Clara saw his eyes dart toward their hiding spot. She froze, heart pounding. Had he spotted them? Lyon tensed, grabbing her wrist. Slowly, carefully, they eased back into deeper shadow. For a long moment, the chamber was silent except for dripping water. Finally, the chanting resumed, albeit in a more subdued tone. Clara risked a whisper in Lyon's ear, "We have to leave. They might see us." He nodded, eyes wide. But curiosity gnawed at her. She wanted to see more, to gather proof that something sinister was happening. The presence of bones and personal photographs suggested these people might be connected to the disappearances. She gestured for Lyon to wait. He stared at her in alarm, but she mimed snapping a picture. They were so close to real evidence. If they fled now, they might miss the critical piece linking these individuals to the missing persons. Against her better judgment, Clara inched forward once more, phone camera at the ready. She managed to zoom in slightly, capturing a shaky view of the table. On the far edge, partially hidden behind the crucifix, she glimpsed an ID card. The name was unreadable from this angle, but it belonged to a woman. The face might have matched the photo pinned under the dagger. Her heart clenched. This was definitely tied to a missing person. Suddenly, a footstep splashed near them. Clara's blood turned to ice. Someone else? She and Lyon turned to see a fourth figure in dark robes stepping out of the gloom. His footsteps had carried him around the perimeter. He was less than 10 feet away. In the candlelight, his face was concealed by a hood, but he must have spotted them because he let out a harsh hiss, a guttural exclamation in French. "Intrus," he cried. "Intruders." Immediately the chanting figures whirled around. Chaos erupted. Lyon grabbed Clara's arm and they bolted. She nearly slipped on the wet floor as candlelight danced wildly. Angry shouts echoed behind them. Footsteps gave chase. Fear surged like an electric current. She clutched her phone, adrenaline spiking. They sprinted back toward the corridor, hearts hammering. She dared a glance over her shoulder and saw two robed figures bounding after them, water splashing around their ankles. The corridor wall seemed to close in. The labyrinth had no easy exit. Could they outrun these people who presumably knew the tunnels better than they did? Clara's breath came in ragged gasps. Her lungs burned, but she forced herself forward, trusting Lyon to lead. They reached the rusted gate, the lock still open. Lyon yanked the door shut behind them and rammed the bolt in place. Their pursuers slammed into it from the other side, cursing. For a fleeting moment, the barrier held. Lyon fumbled with his keys, cursing under his breath. The adrenaline spiked for Clara, but relief was short-lived. She heard furious rattling as the robed figures tried to force the gate open or break it down. "This way," Lyon hissed, choosing another corridor. They dashed off, the flicker of headlamps lighting slick walls. The labyrinth twisted. Clara had no illusions about how lost she already was. She just ran, trusting Lyon's instincts. Behind them, metal clanged. Their pursuers had likely found a way to open the gate or bypass it. After several panicked turns, Lyon guided them up a slope. The floor dryness told Clara they were climbing above the water table. At last they emerged into a narrower tunnel with a cracked ceiling. Lyon slowed, searching for a certain marker. He finally spotted an old carved sign indicating exit. The official path was presumably blocked off in modern times, but perhaps it still led closer to the surface. They rushed along until they found a steel door, welded partially shut. Lyon tried one of his keys, but it didn't fit. He tried slamming his shoulder into it. No luck. Their pursuers' voices echoed in the distance. Desperate, Clara scanned for any alternative route. A small side passage, half choked with rubble, caught her eye. She motioned. Without hesitation, they squeezed through, the broken stones scraping their arms and legs. On the other side, they found themselves in a cramped corridor that dead-ended at a ventilation shaft. The metal ladder rose upward, disappearing into darkness. A quick check revealed the hatch above was locked from the outside. They were trapped. Lyon's face twisted in panic. They switched off their lights, forced to rely on darkness as concealment. Footsteps echoed closer. Clara's heart thundered. They had to hope their pursuers would pass by. She clutched her phone, the picture she'd taken feeling like a fragile lifeline to the truth. Huddled behind a pile of rubble, Clara and Lyon listened to the echoes of frantic footsteps. The robed figures' voices bounced along the stone walls. One man barked instructions in French, cursing as they likely searched adjoining corridors. Every second felt drawn out. Clara fought to keep her breathing quiet, pressing her back against the cold limestone. Lyon's eyes reflected terror in the faint glow from her headlamp, which she had covered with her hand to minimize light. Gradually the footsteps receded. Clara let out a silent exhale. They might have evaded immediate capture. But they couldn't remain hidden here forever. She leaned toward Lyon, whispering in the barest murmur. "We have to find a different route up. Or call for help." Lyon winced. "No phone signal. And I only know a few of the official exit points. That welded door was likely one." Clara's heart sank. The labyrinth might keep them trapped. "We can't just stay," she hissed. "Those people are dangerous. Did you see their ritual?" He nodded grimly. "We need to try going back the way we came, or find another corridor branching off." His gaze shifted to the blocked ventilation shaft overhead. "If we could open that hatch, but not without tools." They waited a few more minutes, listening for any sign of movement. The tunnels were silent except for the distant drip of water. Slowly they edged out from the rubble, flipping their headlamps to dim. The corridor behind them lay empty. Lyon led them forward, retracing steps. Clara's adrenaline still surged, every flicker of shadow sending a jolt of fear through her. She clutched her phone with trembling fingers, the images on it more valuable than ever. If they made it out, she'd have proof of a disturbing secret society, some cult, presumably, operating in the catacombs. Approaching the intersection where they had originally turned, they found the gate from earlier. It stood ajar. No sign of the robed figures. A small mercy, though it put her on edge. They could be lying in ambush. Lyon signaled caution, and they slipped through quietly. The water was calmer here, but the faint reek of something rotten persisted. It reminded her of the shoe they'd seen and the possibility that these people had indeed harmed real victims. At last they emerged near the fork with the serpent graffiti. The sense of déjà vu was unsettling. This place felt sinister now. Lyon paused at the intersection, checking his map with shaking hands. If we keep left, we can circle back to the hatch we used to enter. We'll have to pass that area near the couch. It's about 15 minutes. Clara's chest tightened. Could the cult members be waiting at their entry point? Possibly. But they had little choice. She swallowed a surge of dread and nodded. Let's go. They moved quickly but cautiously. At one point, a cluster of low-hanging bones forced them to stoop. The remains of long-dead Parisians rattled gently as they brushed past. Clara tried not to think about the thousands of souls interred here. She focused on placing one foot in front of the other, anxious to see daylight again. Minutes dragged. The next corridor turned damp again, but the water only came halfway up their boots. Eventually they reached the old cataphile lounge, the chamber with the couch and beer cans. It was deserted, no fresh footprints. Relief seeped in. From here the route to the exit hatch was straightforward. She recognized the path from earlier. Another 5 minutes and they might be free. Then the echoes of footsteps returned. This time from the direction of the hatch. Clara's breath caught. She turned off her headlamp, beckoning Lyon to do the same. Dim silhouettes flickered at the corridor's far end. At least 2 people. Possibly more. They were talking in hushed French, words she couldn't fully catch. But she heard interest again and Monter la sortie showed the exit. They were definitely discussing the hatch. Fear spiked. Lyon cursed under his breath. We can't go that way now. They're blocking it. Clara's frustration built. They were penned in with enemies at both ends. She fought rising panic. Her phone was still useless. If they lingered too long, the cult might begin systematically searching every tunnel. She needed a plan. Then she remembered hearing about older sections of the catacombs that connected to sewers or old train tunnels. Perhaps if they found one such link, they could emerge somewhere else in the city. She whispered her idea to Lyon. His eyes flickered with uncertainty, but he nodded. I know some rumors. There's a sealed portion connecting near Montparnasse station. But that's far and it might be bricked off. Still, it was a plan. Better than waiting to be captured. They doubled back again, trying to avoid making too much noise. The labyrinth twisted in complicated loops. Lyon consulted the map often, shining faint light so as not to reveal their location. She saw new lines and squiggles that he said indicated older quarry tunnels. If they reached a certain junction, they might pass beneath Montparnasse. Could be a dead end, but worth trying. An hour seemed to crawl by as they wove through narrower passages. Once or twice, voices echoed in the distance, prompting them to douse their lights and press against clammy walls. Eventually they found themselves in a series of knee-deep pools formed by water infiltration. The stench was worse here, stagnant and foul. Clara forced herself to keep going. Her feet were numb from the cold water and exhaustion gnawed at her. But adrenaline kept her upright. Finally they turned a corner and discovered a partial cave-in blocking the corridor ahead. Loose stones, collapsed beams. Lyon hissed in frustration. The map says we need to pass here. It's caved. He examined the debris. Maybe we can clear enough to squeeze through. They set to work, moving smaller rocks quietly, mindful that each clatter echoed. The overhead supports looked precarious. Dust rained down. Clara's arms ached. She bit her lip, pushing aside fear that the entire tunnel might collapse. After several minutes, they managed to create a small opening near the top. Lyon slithered through first, then helped pull Clara up and over. The opening was tight, scraping her elbows. On the other side, the corridor continued downward. Once through, Clara took a moment to breathe. Anxiety rippled. She stared at the darkness, uncertain if she could bear more unexpected turns. Then a new sound drifted up from the deeper passage. A faint rhythmic drip, accompanied by a distant hiss. She met Lyon's gaze, both uneasy. Could be steam from ancient pipes or something else. They had come too far to turn back now. They pressed on, determined to find an exit. Somewhere behind them, that cult was still searching, presumably enraged at the intruders who witnessed their ritual. Clara clung to the hope that they were forging a path to safety, even as each step took them deeper into unknown catacombs. She had wanted a grand story, but never imagined it would lead to real mortal danger. The catacombs felt like a realm of their own, with its own rules and hidden horrors. After another 15 minutes of slow, cautious progress, Clara noticed a change in the air. It carried a metallic tang reminiscent of old machinery. The corridor walls here were less bone-laden and more quarried stone, hinting they'd left behind the more commonly ossified sections. Lyon paused by a collapsed arch that bore a faint plaque reading 1847. Dusty script indicated it had once been part of an old mining operation. Beyond that, the floor dipped again, but the water receded, leaving a slick, muddy path. Their headlamps revealed an unexpected sight: rusted iron rails like miniature train tracks, leading into the darkness. Part of an old quarry cart system, Lyon explained softly. They used to haul limestone out of here. Some cataphiles say these rails connect to a bigger underground complex near Montparnasse. Clara's spirits lifted. If these rails led to an area closer to surface-level infrastructure, maybe they'd find a sealed tunnel that could be pried open. She nodded to Lyon, who took point, following the track. The metal groaned underfoot. The air felt stale, but at least the water no longer soaked their ankles. As they walked, the rails turned left, passing through a narrow choke point. Clara's tension spiked. If anyone followed from behind, they'd be trapped. She scanned the darkness, shining her lamp upward to check the ceiling. Ancient timbers braced the stone overhead. Some looked precarious. She swallowed, stepping carefully. Eventually, the corridor opened into a large cavern, its ceiling lost in shadow. A faint echo suggested a vast space. Their lamplight revealed old mining remnants. A battered cart on one rail, piles of rubble, rusted tools strewn about. The rails vanished into a partially collapsed tunnel on the far side. Lyon frowned, pulling out the map. "It's not entirely collapsed," he said. "We might be able to pass if we're careful." They clambered over rubble, hearts hammering. Clara's mind flickered back to the robed group. She prayed they were far behind, or better, lost. But the memory of that ceremony lingered, fueling her urgency. They had to escape these depths and inform authorities. She had photos on her phone that could blow this case wide open. Suddenly, a low rumble reverberated through the cavern, like distant thunder. Dust rained from the ceiling. Lyon jerked his head up, alarmed. "That's not good. Might be a partial collapse somewhere near." They moved faster, weaving around broken beams. The partial collapse they found was a mass of rocks near the exit to a smaller passage, with just enough space to crawl through. Lyon tested the stability. "Seems safe enough if we're quick." Clara nodded, adrenaline spiking again. She handed him her camera bag to lighten her load, then followed as he wriggled into the gap. It was a tight fit. Sharp edges scraped her arms, and dust made it hard to breathe. Once on the other side, they stood in a low passage with an even older set of rails, half buried in silt. Lyon coughed, clearing dust from his lungs. The air felt warmer here, possibly from some long-forgotten ventilation route. A short walk brought them to a series of old wooden doors spaced along the corridor. Each door was banded with iron, some locked, others ajar. One led to a cramped storeroom with rotted crates. Another opened onto a short flight of stairs leading to a bricked-up arch. Lyon tested it, found no give. Defeat weighed on them both. Another dead end. They tried a third door, discovering it blocked from within. Lyon pressed an ear to it. He heard only silence. "Help me push," he whispered. Together, they threw their shoulders against the door. After several shoves, the barrier gave, scraping across the stone floor. Inside was a small room that smelled of stale air and something acrid. Their flashlights revealed an old desk, covered in dust, and what looked like chemical containers scattered around. Clara's curiosity piqued. She stepped inside, eyes scanning. Papers lay strewn across the desk, mostly illegible with age. Some jars labeled "Aside" and "Solution 10%." Possibly remnants of a historical experiment or attempt to preserve bones. Then she spotted a single modern plastic bottle shoved under the desk, an empty water bottle. Could be a clue that someone had been here recently. She snapped a photo for good measure. Lyon rummaged in a corner. "Come see this," he called, voice hushed. Clara joined him, noticing an old wooden crate pried open. Inside she glimpsed tattered clothing, some modern, some older. Another sign that the catacombs had been used for secretive gatherings or storage. The hair on the back of her neck prickled. She recalled the shoe from earlier and the robed cult. Maybe they used this chamber to stash items from unsuspecting victims. Her stomach turned. A clang in the corridor outside snapped their attention. Clara's head whipped around. The door they came through stood slightly ajar. Slowly, it swung shut with a squeak. Heart hammering, she switched off her headlamp. Lyon did the same. They crouched in darkness, listening. Footsteps, soft, deliberate, passed outside the door. They froze, barely breathing. The footsteps paused as if the person were listening too. Clara's pulse roared in her ears. After a tense half-minute, the steps receded. She let out a quivering breath. Lyon mouthed, "We have to go." She nodded. But if the corridor was compromised, how to slip out unseen? They inched toward the door, listening. Silence. Very carefully, Lyon eased it open. A soft glow lit the corridor from somewhere to the left. Possibly a flashlight? They retreated back into the storeroom. Lyon scanned for another exit. He found a rotted hatch in the ceiling. "Looks like it might go up into a small attic or maybe another level," he whispered. Clara's nerves jangled. Another tight climb, but it could be salvation. Lyon stood on the desk, testing the hatch. The wood creaked, but after some effort, the panel slid aside, releasing a shower of dust and debris. From outside came a sudden voice, low, insistent. Clara didn't understand the words, but she recognized the harsh timbre of the robed man who had nearly caught them earlier. She hissed for Lyon to hurry. He hoisted himself into the opening, then reached down to pull Clara up. The old desk wobbled under her shifting weight. Her heart thundered as she yanked herself into the cramped space. Cobwebs clung to her hair. Lyon replaced the hatch as best he could from above, diminishing the faint light from below. Now in near total darkness, they crawled forward. The space seemed like an attic or overhead crawl area. The floor felt like rough wooden boards, the beams overhead so low that they had to keep their heads down. A stale odor suggested it had been untouched for decades. Moments later, they heard the storeroom door below creak open. Someone entered. Clara's throat tightened. Muffled footsteps sounded, accompanied by an agitated voice in French. "Hesitant ICI. They were here." A second voice responded. Then came a sound of rummaging as if searching the corners. Clara's heart hammered. They were precariously hidden just a few feet above. The rummaging continued for an excruciating minute. Through a narrow gap in the boards, Clara glimpsed shadows moving below. The robed figures cursed, eventually giving up. One spat something about retriever less interest, find the intruders. Then footsteps retreated. Silence again. She exhaled shakily, relief coursing through her. But they weren't safe yet. Lyon shifted, trying to find a comfortable position in the cramped attic-like space. Clara slowly flicked her headlamp back on, covering it to keep the glow faint. The area stretched only a few meters before slanting downward, where rotted boards gave way to stone. "We can't stay here," Lyon muttered. "We need to keep moving, but it's impossible to stand." Crawling on elbows and knees, they edged forward. Each board creaked ominously. She worried about plunging through. The dust was thick, making her eyes water. After several yards, the overhead beam dipped so low they had to inch along on their bellies. Her clothing snagged on splinters. Fear churned in her gut. If they became stuck here, they might never escape. Finally, they reached a stone wall where the wooden boards ended. A narrow gap, maybe a foot wide, suggested an opening. Lyon angled his headlamp to see better. The gap revealed another space beyond, this one seemingly made of rough-hewn stone. "It could be another corridor," he whispered, voice muffled. With considerable effort, they squeezed through. Clara's shoulders scraped the rough stone, and for a tense moment she thought she was wedged in place. Panic flared. She exhaled, twisting slightly, then managed to pop free into the space beyond. Collapsing onto a dusty floor, she found herself in a claustrophobic stone tunnel. Lyon followed suit, panting from exertion. The two of them sat for a moment, catching their breath. The environment here felt different, hot, stagnant air that smelled faintly of old smoke. The walls were less refined, more like a natural cave. She wondered if they had stumbled into a different layer of quarries or perhaps some older portion of the subterranean labyrinth. As their breathing steadied, Lyon's voice trembled. "I never came this way. We must be below the mapped sections. That means no help from my notes." Clara forced a determined look. "We'll figure it out. There has to be some route upward." But dread gnawed at her. She checked her phone, still no signal. At least the battery remained okay for now. She resolved to conserve it in case they found a place with a faint signal. They ventured onward. The tunnel sloped downward slightly, jagged rock underfoot. Occasional stalactites dripped from the ceiling, and the sound of dripping water seemed constant. She gripped her flashlight, scanning for any sign of a side passage that might lead up. Suddenly, Lyon stiffened, shining his beam on something lying in the dirt. A scattering of bones. Large, not fully fossilized. Clara's stomach lurched. These weren't part of the curated ossuary. Her gaze traveled to a corner where more bones lay haphazardly. Some had been gnawed or broken. The hair on her arms rose. This was no standard catacomb arrangement. Nearby lay a single, battered sleeping bag. In it, a rumpled shape that made her gasp. the skeletal remains of a human, half mummified by the dryness. She fought to keep from retching, eyes stinging. Lyon muttered a shocked curse. The body was partially clad in modern clothes. No doubt someone who ventured too deep, never to return. Or worse, had been left here intentionally. Clara knelt, glancing at the clothes. The shirt was tattered, but she saw a brand tag in French. The shoes near the remains were from a well-known sports brand. She quickly snapped photos, feeling a macabre guilt for treating it as a story lead. Yet this was crucial. The missing persons rumor might be far bigger than she initially imagined. The tunnel continued past the grisly discovery. They skirted around it, stomachs churning. She whispered, "We have to tell the authorities. This is murder or something close to it." She thought of the robed cult. Could they have left these remains here? They trudged on for another 10 minutes, forced to stoop as the ceiling lowered. Occasionally they heard distant echoes behind them. The robed pursuers might still be searching. An oppressive gloom weighed on Clara's mind. She clutched the phone containing photographic evidence, determined that at least one shred of truth would survive. At last, they reached a side passage climbing upward at a steep angle. The rock underfoot was slippery. Lyon scouted ahead, shining his lamp to reveal a partial collapse near the top. Through gaps in the rubble, Clara thought she saw a faint glimmer, maybe streetlight or a reflection from above. Hope blossomed in her chest. If it led to the surface or near it, they might break free. Together, they scrambled up the incline, sending small stones skittering down. The final stretch required crawling over a large chunk of fallen masonry. Lyon tested it. It held. He then squeezed between two slabs. Clara followed, adrenaline spiking. On the other side, they found a wedge of open space leading to a rusted metal gate overhead. The gate was set into a stone ceiling about 8 feet above. A ladder of sorts, more like embedded iron rungs, rose up the side of the chamber. This could be an old maintenance exit, Lyon whispered, excitement creeping into his voice. Clara's heart soared. If they got that gate open, they might emerge onto some old street or a courtyard. She prayed it wasn't welded shut. Lyon ascended first, testing each rung. The metal squeaked but supported his weight. Clara waited below, nerves on edge. She glanced back down the slope, imagining robed figures swarming out at any moment. She forced the thought aside, focusing on Lyon. He reached the gate and pushed. It didn't move. He fiddled with the lock, but it seemed jammed. "I'll try the keys," he called softly. Time stretched. She heard quiet clinks as he tested different keys. Every passing second amplified her worry. Then, with a heavy metallic groan, the gate shifted upward about an inch. "It's moving," Lyon said, forcing it with a grunt. Another push and it opened a crack. A rush of slightly fresher air wafted down, carrying the faint night scent of a city. The possibility of freedom almost made Clara cry. Lyon lifted it fully, peering out. The gap didn't flood with bright light, so presumably it was still night. "I see a courtyard. No one around," he whispered. "Come on." She scrambled up the ladder. The outside air felt like a gift after the stale claustrophobia of the tunnels. She emerged into a small walled courtyard, the ground covered in patchy weeds. Tall buildings loomed overhead, their windows dark. Likely an apartment complex. The gate they'd opened was disguised as a metal utility panel flush with the courtyard floor. She stepped aside so Lyon could close it quietly behind them. The sky overhead was starless, clouds obscuring any moonlight. Street lamps glowed faintly beyond the courtyard walls. The relief of being above ground again overwhelmed her. She inhaled deeply. The tension in her chest eased, though the memory of the catacombs weighed heavily. They had escaped immediate danger, but the night wasn't over. Lyon signaled for caution. "We should leave quickly. If they figure out we emerged here," he didn't need to finish the sentence. Clara nodded, following him to a rusted gate leading to the street. It was locked from the inside, but a quick lift of the latch freed it. They slipped out onto a quiet road lined with old apartments. A single street lamp revealed deserted sidewalks. Distantly, she heard the hum of traffic. This was some side street near Montparnasse, presumably. The building behind them gave no sign that it sat atop a hidden labyrinth. She turned to Lyon, voice shaking with relief. "We made it. We have to go to the police." He grimaced. "Yes, but I'm not sure if they'll believe us. The catacombs are full of rumors. We do have your photos, though." He glanced at her phone. "And the shoe, the remains. That has to be enough evidence." Clara felt a wave of determination. "Then let's show them. We can't let this cult keep operating. People are dying down there." He nodded solemnly. Together, they started down the street, searching for a major boulevard or a taxi. By the time they reached a better-lit intersection, exhaustion dragged at Clara's limbs. But she pressed on. They found a single cab cruising slowly. She waved it down, ignoring the driver's curious look at their disheveled, muddy appearance. She simply said, "Nearest police station, please hurry." The cab pulled away, engine humming. Clara clutched her phone, dread coiling in her stomach. She had the evidence. Now came the challenge of making the authorities listen, and ensuring neither she nor Lyon disappeared like others who had stumbled upon the city's darkest secret. She glanced out the window at Paris's lights, a city that glowed with life and romance on the surface, never hinting at the horrors in its underbelly. Inside the 14th arrondissement police station, the fluorescent lights felt sterile and harsh. Clara and Lyon waited on a battered bench, glancing nervously at the occasional uniformed officer passing by. Their clothes were still damp from the catacombs, and they smelled faintly of sewage. Other people in the station's waiting area gave them wide berth. Finally, a young police officer approached, eyes scanning a clipboard. "Mademoiselle Sullivan? Monsieur Lyon?" "That's us," Clara said, standing. She introduced herself more formally, adding that she was a journalist. The officer, whose name tag read Duval, gestured for them to follow. He led them to a small interview room with a table and chairs. The overhead light flickered slightly. Clara set her phone on the table, nerves taut. She explained the basics. They had evidence of a possible cult operating in the off-limits catacombs, linked to missing persons. Officer Duval's polite but skeptical expression told her it sounded unbelievable. Nonetheless, she opened her phone's gallery and showed him the grainy photos. Robed figures around an altar, the battered sneaker near water, the partial remains they discovered. Duval's face grew serious. He asked questions, scribbling notes. "When exactly did you see these individuals? Where did this occur?" Clara and Lyon gave as many details as they could. Duval excused himself to consult a senior officer, leaving them waiting again, tension mounting. Lyon fidgeted, chewing his lip. "They might not do anything," he muttered. The police often dismissed cataphile stories. Clara tried to stay hopeful. "We have pictures of them performing some ritual. That's not just a rumor. A body too." Their conversation stalled when Duval returned with a stony-faced detective named Inspector Moreau. She was older, with sharp features. Her gaze flicked over them, measuring. Without preamble, she said, "You claim to have seen a secret society in the catacombs, performing human sacrifices or something akin. Show me your evidence again." Clara repeated her presentation. Moreau examined each photo, lips pressed thin. She said nothing for a long moment, then finally, "You realize catacomb explorers often stage bizarre ceremonies for thrill-seeking. But you also mention remains. That changes things. We do have open investigations regarding missing persons who last explored unauthorized tunnels. This might be relevant." She tapped a photo depicting the ID card pinned by a dagger. "If we can identify that victim, it'll corroborate your claim." Clara exhaled, relieved. At least the detective was taking it somewhat seriously. Lyon spoke up, explaining how he'd lost a friend, Matthew, in those tunnels. Moreau jotted the name. "I'll cross-check. In the meantime, you'll file official statements. We may ask you to guide a police team to the location, assuming we can muster the resources. The catacombs are a jurisdictional nightmare." A flicker of frustration lit Clara's eyes. People are in danger. These cultists might be prepared to kill again. Moreau gave a curt nod. "The Paris Police Prefecture has limited manpower, but we won't ignore potential homicide. Let me see about forming a specialized unit. If your story is genuine, we'll find these criminals." Clara's shoulders relaxed a fraction. They spent the next hour giving formal statements. Lyon tried to pinpoint their route on a catacombs map Moreau provided. The detective's eyes widened at the labyrinthine complexity. She stepped out to speak with superiors, returning with a short update. "We'll need a few days to organize. Meanwhile, do not attempt to re-enter the catacombs." "Understood." Both nodded. Exhausted, they left the station near dawn. Outside, a gray light tinged the horizon. Clara parted ways with Lyon after exchanging phone numbers, promising to keep in touch. She hailed a taxi to her modest rental flat, mind swirling with the night's events. She'd narrowly escaped with her life, uncovered a horrifying cult, and turned to law enforcement for help. Now came the waiting, a powerless feeling. Exhaustion finally hit her and she dozed off in the cab. When she woke later that afternoon in her flat, messages on her phone included one from Inspector Moreau. "Need to confirm details. Please come by station soon. Another from an unknown number. I know about your pictures. You're in danger. Be careful. Her stomach twisted. She tried calling the unknown number. It went straight to voicemail. Anxiety flared. Who else knew about her photos? She dressed quickly, skipping a shower to preserve the remnants of catacombs mud in case forensics needed it. Pulling her hair into a messy bun, she hurried outside, scanning for any sign of suspicious watchers. The city bustled with typical Parisian life. She felt out of sync. People strolled with baguettes, sat in cafes, while she carried the weight of a deadly secret society in mind. At the station, Moreau met her with an air of controlled urgency. We cross-referenced your photograph of the ID card. Matches a missing woman, Celine Durand, reported missing 2 weeks ago. We also matched that battered sneaker you photographed to a separate missing person case. Your story is gaining credibility. I'm assembling a small infiltration team to verify the site. Relief coursed through Clara. I'll help in any way I can, she said. But Moreau frowned. We can't risk a civilian in a possibly violent environment. Our search team will handle it. We'd like you to remain on standby. Frustration bubbled. But I know how to get there. That labyrinth is a maze. Your friend Lyon provided a map and indicated probable passages. We have police who can navigate the catacombs with caving experience. Don't worry. Clara wanted to insist she come along but realized that might hinder official protocol. She nodded, uncertain. The detective's phone buzzed, prompting Moreau to step aside. Clara caught bits of the conversation, something about internal resources and scheduling. Meanwhile, she noticed an officer eyeing her from across the station. She tried to appear calm, but suspicion gnawed at her. The unknown text message replayed in her mind. Who could have sent it? When Moreau finished the call, she exhaled. We'll attempt a search tomorrow night, covert approach. The cataphiles and cult members might have watchers near official entrances. We want to minimize tipping them off. It's standard procedure. I'll keep you updated. Clara left the station feeling both validated and uneasy. If the police confronted the cult, it could turn violent. She also worried about infiltration or leaks. If that group had influence, maybe they had eyes inside law enforcement. The threat felt intangible yet immediate. She resolved to trust Moreau for now, but also keep her guard up. For the rest of the day, she tried to write up a draft article, documenting everything while it was fresh. She kept it offline, storing the text and photos on a secure flash drive. If something happened to her, she wanted the story to see daylight. That evening, the city's lights glowed beyond her window, oblivious to the looming confrontation beneath its streets. Next morning, Clara's phone rang while she was gulping down a quick coffee in her flat. The caller ID showed Lyon. She answered with a mix of relief and worry. Clara? I got a weird message, he said, voice laced with tension. Someone slipped a note under my door saying I should keep quiet about what I saw. No signature. Her heart sank. I got a cryptic text too, warning me I'm in danger. This cult might have outside connections. He sighed heavily. I can't go home. I don't feel safe. Mind if I crash at your place for a night? I'll keep a low profile. She hesitated, scanning her modest one-bedroom. Sure, come over. But we have to be careful. The police plan to do a raid soon. We might be targets for retaliation. Within an hour, Lyon arrived, looking exhausted. He had a small backpack slung over his shoulder, face pale. Clara offered him coffee, and he sank onto her couch with a grateful nod. The tension was palpable. Despite the relief of having a friend close by, an undercurrent of fear remained. They discussed next steps, concluding the best course was to remain in contact with Inspector Moreau, who had promised updates. By late afternoon, Clara's phone buzzed with a text from Moreau. Operation at midnight. We'll contact you after. Clara shared the news with Lyon, who let out a shaky exhale. Neither wanted to wait around helplessly, but the police had insisted. As the hours ticked toward midnight, Clara tried to distract herself by flipping through cable news channels. Lyon dozed on the couch, but restlessly. The city lights outside her window shimmered, ironically beautiful. She dreaded imagining what was happening below ground. Around 1:30 a.m., her phone still hadn't rung. Anxiety knotted her stomach. She tried Moreau's number, no answer. Another hour passed. At nearly 3 a.m., her phone buzzed. She snatched it up, heart hammering. The call was from a number she didn't recognize. Hello, she said. Silence for a moment, then a female voice spoke softly. Is this Clara Sullivan? This is Officer Duval's phone. I have a message from Inspector Moreau. Clara recognized the name. Duval was the younger officer she had first spoken to. "Yes, it's me." "What happened?" The voice cracked slightly, laced with tension. "The operation encountered difficulties. We found evidence consistent with your statement, but the suspect group appeared to have advanced warning. We had a brief firefight in the tunnels. One officer is injured. Moreau is safe but told me to call you. She needs you and Lyon to come to the station tomorrow morning for more discussion." Clara's blood ran cold. A firefight? Did they arrest any cult members? The voice sounded pained. "Not yet. They fled deeper, possibly using hidden passages. But we recovered items. Moreau wants your help identifying them. Please come at 9. Clara thanked the officer, then hung up. She relayed the news to Lyon, who rubbed his face with trembling hands. "So they had a tip-off. That means there's a leak or watchers. Damn it. This is bigger than we thought." Morning arrived in a haze of restless half-sleep. Clara and Lyon caught a taxi to the station. The mood inside was tense, officers scurrying with clipped expressions. Moreau greeted them with weary eyes. Her arm was bandaged from a scrape. She ushered them into a meeting room. Spread across a table were objects in clear evidence bags. Black robes stained with dust, an array of small knives, and a battered camera memory card. Moreau tapped the card bag. "We found a camera near a campsite in the tunnels. Possibly belongs to a victim or cult member. Forensics is trying to recover data." Clara skimmed the other items, noticing a ring with a distinctive emblem, a serpent coiled around a cross. She snapped upright. That matched the graffiti they'd seen. "We saw that symbol on the wall near the ritual site," she said. Moreau nodded grimly. "Unfortunately, our approach was compromised. They left in a hurry, but we suspect they have multiple hideouts. The labyrinth is too big for a single raid. We might need to systematically close off sections, but that could take weeks." Moreau's frustration was evident. Lyon pointed at the knives. "They matched the style we saw. They had a blade on the altar." Moreau let out a slow breath, scribbling notes. "So, we're dealing with an organized group, well-armed and unafraid to shoot. This is no simple folklore." Clara swallowed. "Can you share anything about the officer who was injured?" Moreau's jaw tightened. "He was shot in the leg, stable now. Another officer claims they saw a robed figure with a handgun. They're not just wielding ritual knives. We must treat this like a criminal cult with lethal force." A wave of dread washed over Clara. Gun-wielding fanatics beneath Paris. She wondered what twisted beliefs fueled them. She recalled the ID card pinned by a dagger. Possibly they used personal items of victims in rituals. It chilled her to think how many lives they might have taken. Moreau apologized for pulling them in. "But we need your help. We plan a second operation soon. We'd like you to detail every route, every clue. I know you risk your safety by providing more info. We'll have more manpower next time. The city government is starting to understand the seriousness. If we succeed, we can shut them down for good." Clara and Lyon exchanged glances. Exhaustion and fear warred with moral responsibility. Ultimately, they agreed to cooperate. Over the next hour, they gave Moreau's team a thorough debriefing, describing each passage, the location of the collapsed areas, the watery sections, everything. Clara forwarded her photos and video clips to the police IT specialist. If it helped them plan a final crackdown, it was worth the risk. Before parting, Moreau fixed them with a warning look. "These people are dangerous. We suspect they have watchers on the surface. You both should lay low. If you sense anything off, call me immediately." They nodded. Outside, a bright summer sun glared down, mocking the darkness in the city's bowels. As they left the station, Clara's phone chirped with an email alert. She glanced at it, a spam-like message from an unrecognized address. The subject read, "We are everywhere." Heart-thumping, she opened it. The text was brief: "You betray us. You will be punished." No signature, just a stylized serpent emblem. She gasped and showed Lyon. His face paled. "They have your email? They're threatening you." Clara's hands shook as she pocketed the phone. "We need to be extremely careful. If they're truly everywhere, they could target us again or the police." The gravity of her situation settled in. She'd stirred a hornet's nest. She inhaled, reminding herself that the police operation was expanding. The cult's days had to be numbered. She only hoped they didn't strike before justice arrived. The next few days blurred into a surreal waiting game for Clara. She rarely left her flat, and whenever she did, usually for groceries, she felt eyes on her. Lyon stayed with her, sleeping on the couch, both of them on edge. Inspector Moreau occasionally texted updates. No major breakthroughs, but Operation B was in planning with more specialized units from the Brigade de Recherche et d'Intervention (BRI) to lead an incursion. For her own sanity, Clara tried to compile her notes into a cohesive narrative. The discovery of the robed figures, the chase, the body in the depths, the police raid that encountered armed resistance. She aimed to keep it factual, avoiding sensationalism. If the cult truly had infiltration or watchers in the city, the last thing she wanted was to tip them off with a half-finished story. Still, she needed to preserve the truth in writing. One afternoon, a battered envelope arrived in her mailbox. Inside was a single photograph, a candid shot of Clara on the sidewalk near her flat, taken the previous evening. No note. She felt ice flood her veins. They were surveilling her. She showed Lyon, who grimly shook his head. They reported it to Moreau, who promised a patrol car would pass by more often, though resources were limited. The sense of vulnerability loomed large. By day 5, Moreau called unexpectedly. "We have a lead," she said, voice taut. "An informant from within the cataphile community says the cult might reconvene at a specific hidden chapel in the southwestern tunnels. The BRI will move in 2 nights from now, after midnight. We want you and Lyon near a command center to provide real-time map guidance." Clara's gut churned. She despised the thought of venturing near the catacombs again. Yet she recognized the necessity. She and Lyon were among the few who'd glimpsed the labyrinth's offshoots. If they could direct the police, it might lead to a swift takedown. So she agreed, steeling herself. When the night arrived, they traveled by police van to a staging area near Port d'Orleans, just outside the city center. It was nearly 1 a.m. Crisp tension filled the air. BRI officers in tactical gear milled about, checking weapons and maps. Inspector Moreau stood by a mobile command post, a high-tech van equipped with monitors. She greeted Clara and Lyon with a tight nod, introducing them to a senior BRI commander named Captain Fouker. Fouker was a no-nonsense figure in his 40s, his expression grim. "We'll move in 2 teams through separate entrances, converge near the southwestern sectors. Our intel indicates the group meets in a space they call La Chapelle du Serpent. We aim to catch them mid-ritual. If that happens, they'll be cornered." Clara felt a pang of nauseous anticipation. She'd never been part of anything so high-risk. Lyon's face was pale, but he tried to be composed. Moreau directed them to a screen showing digital maps with potential infiltration points. "Your job is to help us interpret any last-minute changes. We have short-range radio communication once the teams are underground, but no guarantee. So we'll rely on these handheld trackers. If BRI hits an unexpected barrier, they'll radio back and you guide them around." Clara nodded. The operation was about to begin. She perched on a chair, adjusting her vantage to see the map displays. Lyon stood nearby, anxiously scanning his old cataphile map, now digitally overlaid with official data. She gripped her phone, which for once had some limited function at the staging area. The tension among the officers was palpable. These men and women knew they might face armed resistance in pitch-black tunnels. At 1:30 a.m. the teams deployed. Through a live feed from BRI body cams, Clara and the other watchers saw glimpses of the catacomb corridors. Stone walls, glistening with moisture, the occasional cluster of bones. She recognized certain junctions. The feed occasionally crackled with static as the teams advanced deeper. Time crawled. The occasional radio update, Team Alpha, corridor clear. Reaching checkpoint. Then, Team Bravo encountering partial flood, proceeding with caution. Clara's nerves were frayed. She recalled the robed figures and their fanatic eyes. She prayed the BRI had enough firepower to overcome them. At last, near 3 a.m., the radio flared with urgent chatter from Team Alpha. "Contact. We see multiple suspects, robed, armed. They're retreating, pursuing." The feed dissolved into chaotic movement. Flashlights swung wildly in the darkness. Gunshots echoed, barely audible through the static. Clara's heart pounded, adrenaline surging. She clutched the edge of the console. Lyon's face was ashen. Captain Fouker barked orders, sending Team Bravo to flank from an adjacent corridor. The map on the screen showed 2 sets of blinking dots converging. More gunfire crackled. Then a voice, "One suspect down, others fleeing deeper. We found an altar-like area with candles. Request backup." That had to be the chapel. Clara's breath caught. This was it, the site of the cult's secret gatherings. Team Bravo's lead radioed in, "We're sealed off by a locked gate. Need an alternate route." Moreau glanced at Clara and Lyon. This was their moment. Quickly, Lyon pointed to a sub-route on the digital map. "They can bypass the gate if they backtrack 20 meters and take the lower corridor." We used something like that to circumvent a blockade. Moreau relayed the instructions. Minutes later, Team Bravo confirmed the route was viable. The cat-and-mouse chase continued. Clara felt like she was living out a thriller film in real time. The vow to dismantle this cult was on the edge of success or disaster. She prayed no more officers were harmed. Then a triumphant burst of chatter. We have suspects cornered in a side tunnel. Surrendering. Another suspect is fleeing south. Shots again. Silence. Fowker pressed the earpiece, tension etched on his face. Finally, a voice came through. We have 4 suspects in custody. 2 more are down. Several show gunshot wounds. Searching for stragglers. The location is secure. We're sweeping for victims. Over. Relief mingled with shock. Moreau allowed herself a small smile, though her eyes remained sharp. She motioned to Clara and Lyon. We've got them cornered. Not sure if it's the entire group. We'll maintain sweeps. Thank you for your help. Clara felt tears sting her eyes. If these arrests included the ringleaders, the city might be safe from further abductions. She murmured, I hope they find any survivors or remains so families can have closure. As the operation wound down, final updates trickled in. Total of 7 arrests, including at least 2 recognized from missing person investigations. Officers discovered a makeshift shrine with personal belongings of multiple victims. Some partial remains were recovered, though identification would require forensic work. Disturbingly, a handful of cult members apparently escaped, vanishing deeper into the catacombs. Yet the group's primary leadership seemed to be among those captured, and a trove of incriminating evidence was seized. At 6 a.m., the BRI teams emerged, grimy and exhausted but victorious. The atmosphere at the staging area brimmed with relief. Captain Fowker personally thanked Clara and Lyon, praising their crucial directions. A battered Inspector Moreau returned, escorting 2 detainees. She gave a solemn nod to Clara, letting her know the operation had succeeded thanks to their combined efforts. Clara watched the robed detainees be loaded into police vans, their faces sullen or defiant. In that moment, her emotions churned, relief, horror, sadness for the victims. She had never imagined her journalistic pursuit of truth would end in such a violent confrontation, but it had possibly prevented more deaths. Over the following days, the story dominated French media. Headlines read, Secret Cult in Catacombs Busted, Police Operation Foils Underground Ritual Killings, and Journalist and Cataphile Aid in Daring Raid. Clara's name was mentioned in some reports, though she had tried to keep a low profile. She feared retribution from any remaining cultists. But the cat was out of the bag. The police revealed certain details publicly to quell rumors, though many aspects remained undisclosed for an ongoing investigation. In the official narrative, the arrested suspects were part of an extremist sect that believed in harnessing the energies of the dead beneath Paris. They had targeted explorers and vulnerable individuals who ventured into restricted sections. The caretaker, or high priest, was among those killed in the police raid, leaving some questions unanswered. Several missing person cases were partially solved by linking personal effects found in the cult's hideouts, though heartbreakingly, some victims' remains were incomplete. Clara found herself fielding calls from major news outlets, wanting an exclusive interview. She wrestled with her conscience. She had come to Paris seeking a big story, but these events left her traumatized. In the end, she granted a measured interview to a reputable publication focusing on the facts. She withheld graphic details out of respect for the deceased. Meanwhile, Lyon, still shaken, avoided the spotlight, preferring anonymity. Inspector Moreau maintained contact, updating Clara about smaller catacomb sweeps. She admitted some cult members likely remained at large, but their network was crippled. The city government allocated funds to seal off more unauthorized entries. Additional warning signs sprouted around known cataphile hot spots. Over time, hopefully, these measures would reduce the risk. One afternoon, as Clara prepared to depart Paris for a while, wanting distance from the traumatic experience, she visited the 14th arrondissement station to say goodbye to Moreau. The detective met her in a quiet corner of the busy office, wearing a weary but grateful expression. You did good, Moreau said softly, crossing her arms. The press can be intrusive, but your evidence saved lives. We uncovered a vile operation. People deserve truth, and you provided the spark that let us intervene. Clara nodded, emotion swelling. I just wish it hadn't cost so many lives. Moreau's gaze flickered with sympathy. We can't undo what happened, but we can stop it from continuing. Many families will have closure. That matters. They exchanged a firm handshake. Clara promised to stay available for any legal follow-up, though she hoped the ordeal was over. She stepped outside into the bright Parisian afternoon, the city bustling as usual. No one passing her on the sidewalk guessed she'd spent nights fleeing for her life in the catacombs, or aided in dismantling a murderous cult. At the airport, waiting for her flight, Clara scrolled through the final draft of her article. She decided to publish a more in-depth piece, detailing the catacomb labyrinth, the ephemeral boundary between urban life and the echoes of centuries past. She highlighted the courageous efforts of the BRI and the Paris police. She kept out certain names, like Lyons, for safety reasons. She closed the file with a sense of resolution. Her journey had begun with curiosity, but it ended revealing a truth far darker than she'd ever imagined. As the plane taxied down the runway, she peered at the Paris skyline one last time. The catacombs, hidden beneath that storied city, no longer held the same mystery. She knew what lurked in its shadows. Though a pocket of evil had been cut out, the tunnels themselves remained, vast and silent. She wondered how many more secrets lay undiscovered. But for now at least, the worst threat was contained, and she carried with her the enduring lesson that even in the most luminous cities, darkness can lie just beneath the surface, waiting.